He's there.
Yeah, how you doing there, Jim?
June. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you.
June 24th. Same time.
All right, no problem.
So receive.
Let me just, I lost my train of thought there when I asked you to do that, so let me just double check everything.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so I know Wes. We've got Wes. We have other people on the Zoom, but Wes, if you want, I'll kick us off here in person, and then we can roll through this. All right.
Sounds good.
Excellent. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. All right, so we have our hybrid meeting statement. So pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 order extending the temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law, this meeting of the Housing Production Plan Update Working Group is in hybrid format and being recorded. This recording will be available on the town's website and on the YouTube channel. So with that out of the way, let's do a roll call. So Tim Annis. So nope. Norman.
Present.
Stephanie Cavino.
Present in person.
Michael Edelstein.
Michelle?
I'm sorry, Michelle.
You're gonna have to do better than that.
I know, I was gonna say, if no one's sitting there, I might just.
That's right. So then James Lamarna here, present. Michael Gagnon.
Present, if you can.
Brian Jamros, not here, not online. Andrea Matei.
She's
Yep.
on,
Don McKinnon.
Present.
Pam Nichols.
present?
Dan Spangler.
Present.
Okay, we go. Wesley Stanhope.
Present, online.
Brian Stevenson. Here. Jerry Townsend.
Present.
Christine Watkins.
Present in person?
And Peter Zona.
Present.
Excellent. Okay, so we have a public forum. So anyone who wants to speak has got 3 minutes.
This microphone over here, maybe we can do this a little so short over here. Or you can squeeze. I didn't really see that one there. Last time we were all at that table.
Excellent. Could you give your name and address to be?
Sure. James Marin, 80 Burbank Road, Sutton. Just 2 quick questions I'd like to ask the committee if possible. Will a subcommittee be formed to evaluate a non-compliance response to the MBTA community?
Could you repeat the question, please, Mr. Marin?
No problem. Will a subcommittee be formed to evaluate a non-compliance response to the MBTA community?
You don't have to provide an answer immediately. Oh, sorry. I should know better. You don't have to provide an answer immediately. You can take it under advisement if you choose. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking. Will this committee have a subcommittee look into what happens if we do nothing on
Or
MBTA?
develop a plan around doing nothing?
Okay. Not sure what that means, but
It means not, informing the Commonwealth that we're not in a position to comply based on X, Y, Z.
okay. All right. So
Yep.
I mean, I would just add in, Jim, so far, we have not really discussed that option. I mean, it's something we can certainly as a board think,
Yeah.
think about. I just,
On-
that's not something that, I mean,
Yeah. On subgroup number 3, we have looked at some do nothing. We're exploring
Okay,
some do
okay.
nothing options, but haven't taken it so far as to say, to go to the point that you've brought it to. But
Or maybe develop a strategy around it, right?
That's developing.
yeah. Of
Okay.
course, the big question is what happens legally, while it's being challenged too. But I think the thought of many of the teams or many of the folks is that we proceed as though it's going to happen, but then be ready, obviously if it gets struck down.
My understanding of the process is that the subcommittee as it relates, or the committee as it relates to the MBTA question, is kind of proposed language that's included on the warrant for the Springtown meeting, right? So the vote of the audience is going to be to support the recommendation that comes from this committee or not. And I think that the bias of the people in the town is that their preference would be, or a great number of people would hope that that there would be an equal effort put into understanding what the state requirements are and perhaps challenging whether or not compliances are appropriate or the definition of small adjacent community is appropriate or the, you know, I struggle with the whole concept. I think it's a giant push down and really I don't see the state having a seat at the table as it relates to, we're already saddled with 40B, which the committee's going to be taking up next. It's over 8 miles to the nearest MBTA station from any location in town. I think it's an overreach on the part of the Commonwealth, and I'd like to see some debate around whether or not we should even be presenting anything at all. Several towns, including Millbury, have opted not to.
Right. I think another interesting point is if you designate it, it doesn't mean that anything ever has to be built too. So there's different things to consider for how it might play out.
Considering that it's for profit, it's not an affordable housing initiative.
Yeah.
I think that as soon as the zoning is open up, you're going to find a very eager developer that's going to be willing to, especially considering the condition of the housing market, to step forward and advance a project. So to say that the designated piece of land will lay fallow, I think is an unrealistic expectation. That's just my opinion.
So I appreciate raising that.
Through the chair, can I add one point? I think it's important to also consider that if the town does vote no and we don't have that MBTA designation, there are significant consequences in terms of grant funding for the municipality. And so I think that's important to consider. And it does sound like, you know, that's something that we need to understand if that happens, whether it's the goal of this committee or not. I think the goal of this committee, my belief in the goal of this committee is to comply with the current law, which is having that designation. And so it would be up to us to determine how to make that happen. But we also need to understand if that doesn't happen, what are the consequences?
I'm very familiar with the provisions of the MBTA community, and I understand the elements of grants. I understand that the Commonwealth is in the process of redefining what grants would apply. There was, I forgot the town recently, there was a town that had opted to not comply, and the Commonwealth denied a grant for turnout gear for firefighters, and everybody went nuts. And the State House, it was a huge overreach on their part that they would use this to blackmail us into complying with something. Using as a leverage safety gear for public servants it's terrible. So I personally believe that there is a basis. There's several bases to challenge this. I'd be very curious as to what other small adjacent communities have done and what the response of the Commonwealth has been to them. We're all familiar with what happened as it related to Milton. Milton is Metro Boston, urban and well-serviced by the MBTA, right? We're not.
Yeah. So respectfully, I think we're going to cap the time here, but thank you for raising that. It's
One other quick question.
Vice Chair, yeah. Vice Chair, if I can just add on, we're looking at all options, but whatever those options that be laid to the table is going to have to be, we all agreed, it has to be really communicated very effectively, because we know that the 40B, including 40A, MBTA, it's very emotional, it's convoluted, and so we're going to be looking at all options. I feel personally, as of now, I feel there's very good paths that we can take. And once those paths are taken, we all agree, communication is going to be key. It has to be crisp and clear, and we're going to make it crisp and clear so that the residents of Sutton will understand at parity as is board here too. So I just want to make that comment.
Okay. Just from my perspective, and I'm in alignment with several of the people that I know and talk to, they're not necessarily, in order to convince them to vote for this, the understanding, the negative ramifications of a non-compliant solution is going to need to be very well explained. So there's two choices here. One is to either put together something that's compliant or to push back and say it's not compliant. I think it's important that a subcommittee be established to look at the non-compliance part of it, since it's one of two decisions that can be made.
Yeah.
Okay? Will the option presented at town meeting include a plan that exceeds the minimum requirements of the provision?
Can you say that, please?
Will the option presented at town meeting include a plan that exceeds the minimum requirements of the provision?
Probably too soon to tell right now. I mean, the team's still working through, what to recommend.
In what I've seen, there's a number of potential parcels of property that have been identified. To the extent that one of the parcels has the ability to comply with the requirement, would there be additional parcels added? Would we be looking to exceed the requirements of the MBTA Communities Act?
Well, I mean, I think that's something to be decided, but we're also looking to maybe split up the parcels, so not just on one parcel, have them in 2 or 3 different parcels.
But in terms of the unit count,
We don't know
that's-
yet. I mean, how do we?
the unit count that's required
Right.
to comply,
Yep,
it's
Make it over.
possible that,
Yeah.
that the committee would recommend exceeding the requirement.
possibly.
Vice Chair,
Everything's on the table at this point, yeah.
I mean, early on,
Yeah.
the path we were taking, and as I mentioned last week at the select board meeting, without saying too much, is that the avenue where I'm seeing this, the options we have, and in my opinion, is that perhaps options that other municipals may not have. With that said, is, to answer your question, is where we see on some opportunities, and we'll be discussing this because we're broken down in subcommittees, but some of the discussions is, we may have an area whereas it is going to meet all requirements, for instance. It's going to meet the units, right, required, right? So we don't have to really, and that's going to satisfy my town. That's going to satisfy me personally as well, too. And because we want to make sure that it's an area whereas it kind of like hits a number of birds with one stone. And at the same time, it does not disrupt the rural integrity of Sutton, which the people want. So,
My thinking on that is we're so under compliant with our 40B requirement that to the extent that we zone for profit a level of density that displaces potential 40B sites, it's just going to push the 40B housing further into the areas that Norman, you had identified as being undesirable, right?
Yep.
So those were my questions. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you. All these things are being modeled in and assessed at different options. Yep. Thank you. Gentlemen,
Could I, Mr. Chairman, may I make a remark? This is Andrea.
please.
Yeah, we have, in response to Mr. Marin's request on noncompliance, a key piece of information for all committees is the amount of town funding that would be lost if we chose not to be compliant. This question has been on the table since the fall meeting, since before the fall meeting, and no one has actually given this committee or anyone else that I'm aware of an accounting of exactly what the financial cost of noncompliance is. So I would hope that one of the items that we request and receive is a financial accounting of the cost of noncompliance.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Stephanie, did you?
So through the chair, or vice chair, sorry, you're acting chair today, you get that title. Or no, we have Wesley, so I'm sorry, Wesley, your online is different. Anyway, I think it's a real challenge to answer that question, because it's not just that you have current funding that would just suddenly poof and you can put a number to that. It's that the town would have an inability to apply to certain grants, and we wouldn't know what those grants might be. There's a lot of funding coming out in a lot of different areas, whether it's replacing a culvert or building a fire station, putting in sewer infrastructure. This could be all sorts of different things that we may be ineligible for. And so it's really challenging to put a price tag on future potential grant applications in a variety of different sectors.
through the chair, I think what Andrew is referring to also is the fact that we have prior year monies, and just if that was given to the public just as a reference point, to in the past, how many of the grants that are going to be used as non-compliance, that you lose funding from, have we actually received money from in the past? Just so there's something to give the public. And then your answer is right. We could say, and then these are the grant programs going forward, and in the past, we've drawn out of these grants, or we haven't, or this is, there could be a potential exposure, but this is what we would have lost if this had been put in place 2 years ago. These are the grants we would have lost 2 years ago and 1 year ago. I think that's what some people are asking for.
Jen?
Through the chair/vice chair, whoever we're going through tonight. Jen Hager, Community Development Director, we actually did put together a list of all of the ones through the Planning Department, and that wasn't sufficient. So we started going from department to department and finding that a lot of grants are formulaic, which would not normally be considered a problem. And then we saw what happened with the fire formulaic grant and blah, blah, blah. So there's that gray area as well. And if you read the strict language of the statute, and I will put this all on a sheet for you, so it's in one easy place for you to read, it's these grants, it's also consideration on these grants, and then, oh, by the way, it's also consideration and ranking and evaluation on any grant that might in any way touch this subject area, which is that paragraph is what is now being used to go very broadly into compliance and non-grants. So, I'm happy to, and it's on the screen on my computer to print out just the planning ones, which are substantial, and then the list of what I found in other departments. So you have those things, but we need to be very clear, as Stephanie kind of alluded to, that it's not as black and white as you would like it to be, and may carry the other side too in terms of additional enforcement, as was decided in Milton.
Ken?
And to echo or elaborate on that one paragraph, I read the statute, and I'm not an attorney, but in that one statute, it makes it very clear that the state is giving themselves the ability to rank towns based on their compliance level. So the way I read that specific paragraph that lumped everything in at the end, they're going to rank and give a score to each municipality, each town, and then all of the remaining grants that may be in a gray area, they're going to give out to the towns that rank the highest in that. So if we are flat out non-compliant and refuse to comply, we're obviously going to put ourselves in a position where some of those grants are, not only should we not apply for them, we're never going to get them, because our ranking is going to be that low.
Can I ask one more question? So, as we all know, the regulations are emergency regulations at this point, and they're under public hearing review until the 21st of February. So there's an open public comment period. So, Jen, I know that the planning board has prepared a letter that you're looking at, maybe the number of units on a lot and some other information. Would the board be willing to question the appropriateness of this piece of the regulation? And in addition, does any of the filed legislation for this session of the legislature address this grant issue?
I drafted the letter consistent with the original letter the board drafted back in 2022. If you read that letter and you've read the letter that we put out, the department's position and the board's position is acknowledging there is a need for multifamily housing. Whether people agree with that or don't agree with that, that is the department and the board's position. So what we had issues with was that broad brush, one-size-fits-all application that you saw within the original regulations, or the original guidelines, which are now being made into regulations, which had basically Sutton and Sutton communities, even smaller than Sutton, having a floor of 500 units minimum production, which is crazy, and triple some towns' actual existing number of housing units or more. So we pushed back on that. We pushed back on a one-size-fits-all density per acre measurement. And we pushed back on the fact that this shouldn't be tied necessarily to MBTA communities only or adjacent communities. Multifamily housing units, which constitute anything other than a single-family home, so a duplex, a triplex, or bigger, are necessary and needed in every community in the Commonwealth. And that we should be looking this as a responsibility across the entire Commonwealth, not to 177 communities. So we stated all of those things, and the state, a lot of other communities pushed back on some of those issues as well. The adjacent small community level was added, and Sutton's numbers went down to 5%, all those adjacent small communities, so now we're at 181 total units. They did not address making it statewide. They did not address the 15 units per acre. So what you see in the letter that the board agreed to send on Monday night was those two things restated. So the board did not comment on which grant programs or anything like that, and they did not push back and say, this is not an emergency, we don't need multifamily housing, because that's not the position of the department or the board.
So given the fact that we had on the fall town warrant a bylaw recommendation to add 15% affordability to any type of development in the town over 5%, does the fact that the MBTA bylaw, MBTA regulations does not have a mandatory affordability when the 40B program requires every town to have 10%, and currently hardly any town or the state is at that compliance level? So should the board, this board, the planning board, the individual people, individual citizens be commenting during this comment period for that? Because we're going to have to add 181 houses, and theoretically, we wouldn't have to have any affordability. We could put into our bylaw that the developer, if we put a 10% in and they didn't want to do it, they'd have to pay us some money. But that's not progressing the state's 1969 law. So should there be a comment in the planning board's letter to that effect as well? Since this is all about lack of units and affordability, and they put no affordability in these regulations.
Yeah. Again, the department and the board realize there's a provision that says we don't want you to be using affordability to basically make these multifamilies uneconomic. And there is an allowance that has not just been upheld, but has been reported in any number of state training sessions, you name it, A, B, Z, that at least 10% will be upheld in any town's bylaw. So from the planning department, and I believe the planning board's position, though I keep speaking for them, so I probably shouldn't do that, but Mike can throw something at me, that we would never consider an MBTA regulation without at least 10%. And we will fight for more than that if this committee or whoever's putting forward the bylaw, if they put forward one, wants us to go to those lengths. And again, we have the sample from Grafton to see what you need to do to get it higher than that. It's tough for Sutton to get it higher than that because it's based on your actual demographic.
But it pushes the compliance down to the individual local
Oh, yeah, no.
voting bodies when it's the state government that's already mandated this through 40B. I think it's remiss on their part that if that's really their goal, that they didn't put that in this. It
No.
doesn't make the legislation in sync.
No,
And it
exactly.
puts-
Vice Chair, if I may, this is all great information, but we do have a lot to do, so this
Yeah.
definitely just take this under advisement for now.
Sure.
Many of the groups are working on stuff that is all gonna cover all of this.
Yep.
So, let's just take it under advisement, we'll formulate something and can get back to the public.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we'll get to this also in Group Two's presentation, probably in 5 minutes, but do we have another, I think we had another open forum?
Anybody?
No, you good? Oh.
How you doing? I'm Ron Roy, 86 Highland View Drive, and I was up at the planning meeting the other day too. Just wanted to make sure I share with the group here, and the team here has a tremendous responsibility. It's a big job just to be pulled together so on a short-term basis. A lot of folks involved in it, so it's really I commend you for taking this on. So it's a good challenge for you. But I just want to pass along some of the information that we were talking earlier about was the current bills that are flying through that have been applied to. There's about 23 bills that 11 lawmakers have put forth. And it's going to address these guidelines, but also the bill itself, the MBTA communities. Anywhere from looking for exemptions for small towns like us, and then all the way to full repeal as well. So there's a number of bills that are on there. And I would recommend anyone to contact the state rep and senators. I have, and asked them to co-sponsor, and they're starting to co-sponsor that too, those bills. They didn't initiate any of them, but they're starting to co-sponsor them too. So a lot of folks are starting to sign up on this and it's gaining momentum. So reach out to your representatives and senators and talk to them about that and tell them the concerns that you have about it. And the bills are up there in plain sight. So it's great to see and what they're trying to address, because it's a flawed law. It really is. The other thing I just wanted to bring forward too is about you've seen the Milton decision, and I think on the town website they posted some information about it. It tells part of the story though. It really was a victory for the small towns, because although they said the law was, and again, they just argued about the law, was it done in the right manner in the process? There still has to be adjudicated though. Aspects of it like, are we a small adjacent town? Why is that included? So those things still have to be adjudicated. But the big win was actually throwing out these guidelines that they submitted. That was a big win. They tossed them out. The Supreme Court tossed it out and said they didn't go through the APA process, which is the APA process is really to make sure that towns like us, we have the proper input. People have input and say into what's going on. So they tossed that out and they said, you've got to go back and get these guidelines, go through the normal process and have them fleshed out. Well, the state came back with these emergency guidelines, which really were the same ones that they had before, but they just slapped emergency on it. And what is the emergency? For something that's been out there, it's just because they have we still have a declared emergency that's been out there since the end of 23. And it has to do with the migrants that are coming in. That's the only declared emergency that we have today. Of the 14 declared emergencies since 2001, 12 of them have been weather-related, and the others have not been. And this is one that's still open. So there's also a lawsuit that's been filed in Superior Court challenging these emergency regulations too. So that's something that just came in last week. That's been filed too. So there really isn't any emergencies, and these emergencies. Declaring something emergency like that, they're taking our rights away from us. Just by setting it out and taking your rights, what else could they do? They already did the ADUs, because you don't have any say into the ADUs anymore. The state came in and said, you can have ADUs. What else are they going to do? So I think, we have to send a strong message back to them. And like Holden just didn't answer any of it. They're non-compliant. And Millbury voted no as well, even though they're going to submit a plan, but they still said no. So I just don't think it's right for us to respond and react to these guidelines until they've been fleshed out. And they've gone through the APA process and everyone has input into them. So that's what I just wanted to bring forward to let you know about that, what's going on. And so, and that's really what my input is to the process that you're going. When I saw that you're looking at the MBA process and potentially looking at bylaws, adding into it, I think to me it looked like it was beyond the scope of what they originally set out. When I was looking at the original meeting and then the board what it's going to be doing, then I see on 2 items that it's going to do the MBTA bylaws, and I thought, wow, that's different. That's different than I saw the original affordability of the 40B process. So that's really why I came forward. I'm really concerned about what the direction, and you've got a big pie that you're trying to consume. And if you're looking at the affordability process, that's great. Look at that portion of it, address that, and the other MBTA stuff, that should be either separate effort, separate process, and a standalone item from maybe a special town meeting that should address it, because it's got to be standalone. That's a big effort, and it's something that may potentially should should be due later on. I think you're rushing it to get into spring. That's a big push. So, that's just, thanks for the time and appreciate it. And, again, reach out. The comment period is still open out there for the until the 21st. You can go online, submit the forms. I put 6 through. Not just, addressing, the density. That's the least of my worries. The other are, we're 8 miles away from the train station. We don't have any MBTA, any kind of station coming through, any bus stops. We're actually sending $65,000 every year funding to the MBTA. And what are we getting back for that? There's no stops out here in Sutton. There's nothing. I checked on even the WRTA. There's one that goes by it, but it doesn't stop. It goes down to Northbridge.
Yeah.
Right? So we're sending money to the MBTA. We're not getting anything back. I think we should really think clearly about what we're trying to do with the MBTA process. Thank you, and
Thank you.
You've got a big task. You really have a big task. And
Thank you, Ron.
thank you.
All right. So that's it for public forum. Anybody else? No? Good. All right, so we'll approve the minutes from last week. I get a motion to approve.
Second?
All right. So let's go around, I guess.
Norman Champion, aye.
Jim Mara, aye.
Oh, Christine Watkins, aye.
Stephanie Cavino, aye.
Dan Spangler, aye.
Pam Nichols, aye.
Don McKinnon, aye.
Peter Zone, aye.
Jerry Townsend, aye.
Mike Gagan, aye.
All right. And on the,
Wesley Stanhope, aye.
thank you, Wes. Andrea?
Andrea Matei, aye.
Which Brian is online? Is that Brian?
Yeah, Brian Stevenson, aye.
Okay. Anyone else? Nope. All right, so approved. All right, we also have to, we have a proposed change in clerk. So Michelle has asked to step down, and Christine has graciously offered to step up. So we get a motion to accept Michelle's resignation and Christine's ascension.
I motion to accept Michelle's resignation and Christine's designation as clerk.
Excellent.
Andrea Matei.
Second? Norman
All right.
Champion?
Second.
All right. Jim and aye. Christine?
Christine Watkins, aye.
Stephanie Cavino, aye.
Dan Spangler, aye.
Pam Nichols, aye.
Don McKinnon, aye.
Peter Zone, aye.
Jerry Townsend, aye.
Mike Gagan, aye.
Okay. Wes?
Wesley Stanhope, aye.
Okay. Andrea?
Brian Stevenson, aye, yes.
And Andrea, aye.
Excellent. Okay. So I think we're now through the formalities. And now we're on to Group 2's presentation on the MBTA Fast Track Review.
What's the best way to, do you want me to do it from? I can Zoom? Sure. Do you know it off the top of your head, or should I just?
I just have a revolt statement. With this in it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through the chair,
Yeah.
may I make a motion, this is Andrea Matei, may I make a motion to consolidate 2 agenda items into the discussion of the MBTA parcel, and that would be the MBTA parcel and the discussion of the bylaw into, so that we would take them together as opposed to in a separate order.
Yeah,
It's a procedural motion.
it sounds reasonable. Do we need a full vote on that?
I think we need a second and then a vote. It would allow us to discuss both issues at one time.
Yep, Norman Champion, second motion?
Okay. Let's go around. Jim and aye.
Christine Watkins, aye.
Stephanie Cavino, aye.
Dan Spangler, aye.
Done.
Don McKinnon, aye.
Peter Zone, aye.
I also
Jerry
can second
Townsend,
it
aye.
if you want.
Mike Gagan, aye.
Norman Champion, aye.
Okay.
Pam Nichols, aye.
30th.
Wesley
Oh,
Stanhope,
I'm
aye.
on the wrong one. That's not today.
Brian Stevenson, aye.
That's not today's.
Andrea?
Andrea Matei, aye.
Find it.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll cover those 2 agenda items together. That's a good idea.
Right, so that if we decide, somehow we branch off and we're discussing bylaw content, we're not out of order.
Yeah.
That's the current agenda?
All right.
We just combined 2 laws.
We're just getting the Zoom presentation set up here to to roll into the parcels.
Yeah, I have the right one if you need it.
And now I have to give you permission, so give me a hot second.
It's right there. Okay, thanks.
That's the current one.
Is this the same? No. You guys change it up.
We have to change it up every time.
Secure.
Which group was doing bylaw?
That was group 4.
Sorry. I have to order.
I'm not fast enough for you, Pam. Thank you.
Because I'm just gonna make her co-host.
Okay. So it should be there.
Okay, good.
Great. Let me make sure that my audio is off. No audio. And am I able to share my screen? Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect.
You have to back up.
Oh, I'm giving everything away. Great. So I don't have to be the one to present this. I just happen to be the one to make the slides, but this is what we came up with from our group, which is Mike, Steph, Dan, and myself. And at any point, if anyone else in the group says, you misunderstood, fix this, just let me know. So the 5 parcels that we looked at, oh, it's not changing on your screen. That's a thing with Google Slides. It doesn't like it. So I'm going to keep it in this mode because Google Slides doesn't like it when I put it in presentation mode. Sorry. So the first parcel, depending on where you're looking, it's either 1 or A, was 48 Worcester Providence Turnpike. And basically we came up with a overview recommendation of maybe this wasn't really our top tier of parcel. It might be a future development. So overall, it's about 27 acres. It's currently zoned as B2. It has limited wetlands in the north, but not really an issue. You can see that on the map on the right, the green part. It's directly, it has challenging grades and slopes. You can see on the bottom right picture. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's quite sloped, but it's possible. It's directly on 146, so access would be challenging. Once you got on, you'd only be going in that one direction. Everyone would have to turn around. It does not have water and sewer at this time. The town had secured some grant funding, but there were some, I won't go into all of it, but basically we don't have water and sewer here right now. And if we had this used as housing, it would preclude a commercial tax base because it's currently B2. So that was one of the priority concerns about several of these parcels is the town has very few areas that are commercially zoned, so we were hesitant to turn commercial zoning into residential. So overall, it's possible in the future, but at this moment, we didn't have a sort of priority recommendation on this parcel. Is there anything else that anyone else wanted to add for that parcel? Okay.
The only added thing was that parcel is, with the slope, it's ledge. It's not. So we were looking at soil in some of the parcels, and this was ledge. That was the only thing I'd add.
Great, thank you. So the second parcel, or B, depending again where you're looking, on Unified Parkway. Generally, we said yes on this parcel. It would be one of our priorities to explore. So this parcel is in the northeast of Sutton. It's a very large parcel, over 160 acres, so we would not consider designation of that entire parcel. You can also see on this part here, that whole pink area is Wellhead 2 protection zone. The top has some power lines, very large power lines running through. There are easements here. So in the northern part of the parcel is about 17 acres that might be potential for designation, but the southern part of the parcel is really where I think there's more opportunity. It's about 22 acres there, and in particular, in that southern part, 2.8 acres are already in a cleared pad and ready for development. So if you consider the entire 160 acres, it has a lot of different challenges, including wetlands, ponds, slopes, but those north and south portions do not have severe environmental concerns. It does have water, sewer, and gas on the south already. Again, that's part of why the southern parcel would be better, but there's a question of capacity for the Wilkinsonville water district. So the hookup is there, but we don't know if the capacity is there. It's going to be a separate issue. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just to be, and correct me if I'm off, but I think the southern parcel is the one that's right off of Boston Road.
Correct.
Yeah.
And one of the negatives we found with this site was with the northern parcel, one, that 17 acres in the top does, as you mentioned, have the power lines going through it. So it's not truly 17 acres. You can only put an easement straight across those power lines, not along them. And the other negative we had on this one, the positive for the southern part of it, but the negative for the northern part, if it were split, is the road that there's access to for this large part is very small and windy. And we put that as a negative because that road is smaller than many in Sutton.
So maybe we should have broken this up, because I would say the northern part is more of like a, not really, but the southern part would be the.
We didn't, I thought you had a separate one for it. Okay.
Is there frontage to the northern part off Dudley Road?
Where?
There.
Does anyone know?
Oh, this map.
Is there any frontage on Dudley Road for the northern parcel? Because it's on the power line, so where's the frontage for the parcel?
You can see here.
There is frontage. It's
Here.
it almost
It's a
looks like an
narrow
easement,
corridor.
but it's not an easement. It is part of the parcel.
But you can see these are the power lines that are running
So
through.
is that at least a 50-foot right-of-way? Don't you usually need like 100 or 250?
Yeah.
So they don't need an amount of frontage along the road that would be considered a roadway if you chose that parcel? Just wondering. Because with the cottage thing, you had to have so much frontage in order to tuck it in overfill. Is this different because it would be a road?
Again, it depends on how it's zoned and the like. So, I mean, I think MBTA requires a minimum of X feet of zoning, so you'd have to keep that into consideration as well. But it does have 40 now, so that could also be a private roadway into a parcel, so.
And the only other thing with the sewer, there is available capacity is what we had written down for the sewer. So it's not just available, there's
In the line.
capacity, right?
Yep.
Oh, you did put that.
So, again, overall, this area is close to public transit, or close to transit corridors, I should say. Multiple town lines, Grafton and Millbury, and has the potential for a positive workforce housing site. The third parcel is 99 Boston Road.
Did you have a question, Wes?
Yeah, just wondering on that south side, you said there was a flat section, because I know myself and Brian took a drive around on Saturday, and it looked kind of hilly, but you said there's a flat section on it?
The flat section is cleared.
There's a cleared pad. It's about 2.8 acres.
And
it's not visible from the
2.8.
road.
If you
Okay.
walk in, you can
And-
see
and
it.
is
It's several acres. I don't,
You gotta go.
when I'm looking at it, I don't know if I'm looking at 2 acres of cleared or not, but it's several acres of cleared, and you have to walk in a little bit to see it, but it is there.
If you look at the aerial, it's kind of hard to see if I make this really big for a second. You can see this sort of cleared area here. So we
That could be
went-
made larger if needed.
the pad could be, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Stephanie, what's the, in your presentation here, what does the underwater sewer gas, what does the Q of Wilkinson
Oh.
water capacity?
Q is just question. Sorry, I always do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. I mean, it's interesting. This one is, my reaction to this is that it is workable if we applied some thought to it as to how the parcel could be reconfigured for residential. So I'm not as discouraged by the fact that there are power lines. As you drive, as we all know, as you drive through Millbury and Grafton there, and particularly around where the golf courses are, there are many opportunities to view power lines through residential areas. So I think we could work with that. So thank you for this.
Absolutely. So anything else on 2?
I think you might want to just go through all 5.
Okay,
And then
sure.
we have time to open, kind of go back to them just to make it easier for you.
Sure. So the third is 99 Boston Road. This is basically across the street. So the other parcel would have been like up here. So we're just crossing over Boston Road. This is part of the Galaxy development. So overall, it's about 14 and a half acres. But again, there's already an existing cleared pad of about 2.5 acres. It's sort of challenging to see on maps because there's so many different resource areas that surround this parcel, and a lot of it is really unbuildable. So anytime you see this crosshatched area, it's like, don't touch it. FEMA will not, it's a regulated waterway, floodway. It's basically impossible. So we would be staying within this smaller parcel in the yellow area. So
I'm sorry, so you mentioned 100, previously was 100 units, 40B flying, which I recall. Are we capped at 100? Could be more, could be increased to 200, for example?
that's not part of what I looked at, so I'm not the person to
Okay.
answer.
No.
Okay.
So can it go beyond 100 units?
When you're talking about a potential MBTA or 40B, you can go as big as you have water and sewer to supply. The question is, when you think about whatever the recommendations are going to be, if you do an MBTA and you do the design section, where I would assume in Sutton, you would not want to allow high-rise multifamily
Right.
buildings, you would want to allow something more scaled, then that's when you figure out with the area you have and the maximum height you have and the maximum coverage you put in the bylaws, what you can get out of it.
Okay.
But both the Venacasa proposal and the prior, which I don't think you were here for, not many people were here for, John Leclerc proposal before he went bankrupt, that was 60 units in 3 buildings, 20 each. So I think you're pretty much in the 100 area, which
All right.
goes to Stephanie's comment earlier on, maybe you don't choose just one MBT area to do 200 units, you choose 2 to do 100 units each. So it's split up a little bit, not as dense, not as much massing in buildings on one site.
Okay, so the question is, Stephanie, for that 2.5 acre cleared pad, is that the limit, or can it go beyond that? Just 2.5?
You can't go very much beyond the limit because you're surrounded by water, basically. You have a pond going here, you have a stream going around, you have a waterway, you have a Title V protection area. There's a lot of constraints around this parcel, which doesn't mean it's not possible. The area that's already cleared and graded is ready to go, and it is currently mapped as NHESP Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program for a rare species. However, it's a disturbed land. You would just need to get a letter from the state saying, no, you're good here. I
Yeah,
don't
because sometimes
anticipate that that's
species
actually an issue.
change, right, in terms of, you could have that species, from I understand, 1 year.
Anytime you
build.
have NHESP mapped anywhere that you're developing on that parcel, you have to just get a letter from the state. And sometimes it's a concern. In this case, I would not say it's a concern because it's a cleared and graded site.
Okay.
They would have already had to go through whatever that is.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Yep. So again, around this parcel, you have slopes, you have dams on either side, you have floodplain, wetlands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you stay within that area that's already developed, you're good. Again, it's close to a transit corridor, town lines. I see why you had that question now about previously it had a 100-unit 40B filing. Yeah. It's really close to a bunch of amenities because it's within the Galaxy development, Market 32, et cetera. Again, this question, housing development would preclude commercial tax base. So that's one of the questions.
Can I just quickly ask Jen? Isn't the MBT an overlay? So if there's not a development, you can still do the previous zoning and develop it if a
Yes.
developer doesn't come in.
Yeah, MBT
So
is
we're
the
not
overlay.
losing the commercial base unless a developer comes in to put housing.
Exactly, yes.
And I'm working from Wes's photos here, so hopefully I understood. I'm not sure that these are actually 99 Boston Road now that I'm looking at them.
So this is the third parcel. Yeah, this is the small one that you're talking about with the water around it. The one on the left, though, that's the open pad
That
next
is
to Market
this
32,
one,
though.
not this one.
Right? So that's the pad. Well,
This is the correct
Where'd it go?
one. Yeah.
No, go. If you just undo what you just did. Okay.
There you go.
So the one to the left, the one to the right is the one you want to keep.
Okay.
The one on the left, that's your open pad next to market 32. So you could get rid of that one if you want. But the one on the right, that's we'll call it like a bowl. So that clearing that you were talking about where you had water going all the way around it,
Yep.
and you're talking about like endangered species, it's kind of like Brian was kind of explaining, like it could have been like an open pit like clearing before. It looks like there was a hill there and they mined it out. So it looks like a bowl. You're standing down where the hill keeps on going around you like a little berm on most of the sides around. So you can see like to the right, the hill goes up a little bit and then tree line starts and then it goes down to the wetlands on the other side. And that curve keeps on going the whole way around that bowl. So when you go back to your map, you'll see like that curvature. Yeah, see that? There's like a curvature of the yellow that keeps on going around. Yeah, there you go. That's that curvature of that. So you can probably work within that bowl for building units.
Yep. Yeah.
Now that 100-unit building they had shown, that was squeezed in there.
Yep.
Their parking lot was nearly in the wetlands.
Okay.
I think the other neat thing of this one is a 40R, which I hadn't known about before, but that sounds like a neat program.
Yeah. Jen can probably speak to that more, but that was one thing that we thought of for a few of these parcels, is it might fit in really well to have mixed-use development. So that way you have one building where maybe you have a grocery store, not a grocery store, a cafe or, a restaurant or what below.
And living above it.
And people living above you.
Correct.
Don't the current regulations require the E EOHLC to review any type of 40R designation? Isn't that in the regs?
Any kind of, so I don't want to go off too sideways on 40R before we're done with this, but yeah, 40R is a designation that is approved by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. The good news is there is a certain amount of encouragement to basically layer MBTA and 40R. So.
Can you just say what 40R is for people who might be watching?
40R is smart growth zoning, and that encourages, it's a higher density of housing, 8 units per acre single family, 12 units per acre for duplex and triplex, and up to 20 units per acre for multifamily, which is a little daunting. But it mixes it with commercial uses. So you often have things sprinkled in together, or first floor commercial or business uses with apartments over. Makes for its own little kind of instant little neighborhood.
Yep.
So.
I feel like we should all give Jen a trophy for knowing all of these facts on the top of her head. I can promise you this is not every municipality having someone as knowledgeable as Jen, so you have a real resource in this town. So for the fourth parcel, D, it's several parcels together, actually, that would all be considered. So if we look at this one, it's all of this here. So you have 30 and 34 Pleasant Valley Road, and then 151 and 157 Boston Road. So this one has water, sewer, gas. Again, it is a question of whether Wilkinsonville has the capacity for it, but it has a hookup. The entire thing is also in a well-to protection zone. That's that pink kind of overlay here. It has some floodplain in the south, but very easily avoidable. It's on the very edge. It's near 146, and it's just south of it, so it's it might be an opportunity to offer, because you have these two different roads sort of in and out. It has several amenities nearby, and again, there's a concern of potential housing precluding commercial tax base, but if we were to consider something like 40R, you are able to bring in that commercial tax base again, so it would work very well for that.
And you said that, just to be clear, that the smaller box,
This-
it is part of that,
Yes,
right?
yep.
So that this and the two lots that
Yep.
are on Boston Road.
Yep,
So
all
it's
of this.
4 total.
And I see here mentioned that you have 40R as well, as this is possible
Yep.
40R?
Yeah,
So-
but it's not.
Yeah, no, none of it is right now. but nothing is designated
Yeah,
right now.
No,
That's
so I
what
see
we're
possible,
talking.
I'm saying possible mixed use.
Yep, so why we mention that is, again, because it's zoned as B2, so this is one of the, I think it's, someone said 8% of Sutton's tax base is commercial, and so we want to be able to encourage that commercial growth, and so this 40R would have this opportunity to mix both commercial and housing.
Exactly, right, thank you.
Mhm.
Perfect.
So the fifth parcel, the last one, is 3 Lackey Dam Road. It's the only one that's not in the northeast corner. It's in the very southeast corner, right up, basically on the town line. It's about 40 acres. It's currently zoned OLI, which...
Office light industrial.
Office light industrial, thank you. Yes, has water, sewer, and gas. There are some small wetland areas. Apparently, this is what shows on MassGIS, but it actually, it went through permitting before, and it's more than that, but it's still avoidable. This is, again, 40 acres. It's a very large parcel. It's also interestingly mapped as prime agricultural soils, but I don't think it's going to be likely to be used for agriculture, so I wouldn't really worry about that. It has a lot of industrial uses nearby, including a large solar array and a warehouse. It's close to transit corridors, your town lines, Walmart's right down the street. Again, potential for workforce housing, and again, this possibility of thinking about maybe 40R, because you have, your housing would preclude industrial tax base in that office light industrial. And there's some more photos of that.
Stephanie, this is Andrea, if you were to rank these parcels in terms of walkability, where you could walk to from them,
Yeah, this would be the top one.
just from your own, I'm not, this is just an off the cuff, but what would be the clear winner in walkability?
99 Boston Road. You are in a complex where you already have shopping, you're near other things going on. Yeah.
Because walkability is one of the things that ends up getting into the consideration. And 99 Boston Road is the one that has the magnificent configuration of wetlands and water resources and
It
running
looks
water.
terrible, but it's really not. I did environmental permitting for years for the city of Worcester, and it looks scary, but you have a cleared, ready-to-go parcel. Once you have things cleared and graded, it's already been done, you're just coming in and building something on it. It's much less of a concern as long as you have appropriate erosion controls.
Yep, so the yes here, and if we put the walkability test in, the clear winner is 99 Boston. Would the runner-up be Unified?
The southern portion of Unified, yes.
Yeah.
For
so-
walkability.
But then walkability.
Walkability.
For the fifth one at Lackey Dam Road, if
Yep.
the walk to Walmart from that point, now keep in mind there's no sidewalks on that road yet, but in theory, with sidewalks, the walk to Walmart is maybe 4 minutes.
Okay.
Right.
But the other two, you could walk to the Galaxy Shopping Center.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I see the one that we talked about, 40, oh, yeah, that one there. How far is that from near the Market 32?
So the piece in the upper corner is where the post office is. So that's where the post office yes. So it's adjacent to the post office, the coffee shop, and the Unibank. It's on the southbound side. So if you're going to walk from there, you'd walk up to Boston Road, go across the stoplight. So you're crossing 146 if you're walking to get to, and then we know how that worked out with some of the Red Roof residents. It's hard to walk across there.
No, correct. But they're pretty much across the street from each other.
Yes.
Okay.
I think if I could just jump in, it's an interesting piece, the whole walkability, because I don't think it is something in our small group discussion that we really brought up, because when I think of Sutton, I don't necessarily think of it being a walkability town anywhere.
This is walkable, this one neighborhood here.
Right. But
I
that's,
walk all over the town.
but I mean, again, no, but we're talking walkability to go to the market.
Right,
Go
with the
pick up,
bag of
you know,
groceries, right.
Right, I mean, I want to go.
Yeah,
buy-
Mike, I'm introducing it because I think that walkability is something we need to think about because we want that to happen, right? There's going to be multifamily housing here. Where do you walk to?
Right. No, I think it's an interesting
You
concept
know,
to.
and the other question I'd like to introduce is in a number of the statutes, the bylaws that I've looked at in other towns, for every, you know, designation of an MBTA parcel, they are also doing restrictions for non-developed land. So they want to kind of balance the developed with the restricted and the preserved. And it's that balancing that I think in the long term is what really is consistent with what Sutton is about, right? The lands that we don't develop. And walkability helps us keep down the intensity of the traffic. So I just wanted to put it out to the group. Stephanie, this is a fabulous
Again, I don't take
presentation.
credit.
It's
I
not a
just
criticism, it's just a question. You know, it's just a question.
If I can make a comment regarding that lot too, like those across the street, I'm thinking long range, is that eventually we'll probably see a flyover, right, of 146 over the light. I don't know how soon, but eventually, which means that the walkability will be probably less perilous, you know, in a sense. Right.
Yeah, totally, Norman. I mean, frankly, if we structure some kind of flyover that is unwalkable, shame on us. Right? Because we're not trying to maroon the two sides of 146.
Exactly.
It's not allowed.
We're trying to
under-
join them.
It's not allowed now under federal or state funding. You have to, if you're constructing new roadway, including flyovers, it has to be multimodal. So not only would it have to have pedestrian, it would probably have to have a bike line as well.
All right, very good. All right, thank you, Jen.
So
Okay, thank you, Jen.
when you previously talked about this, it looked like you were saying the 2.5 acres would be the only amount that would be developable. So if we have 181 units with a density of 15 to
two different parcels we're talking about.
99.
Yeah, you
So
couldn't
this-
do just this and meet your requirement. You'd have
If
to
there's
do
only 2.5 acres of the 14, that's potentially there,
on this
available
lot.
on this lot.
I think,
So
but this other lot is 160 acres and has these two larger parcels. 2.8 acres is already cleared, but you could do more than that.
right, but this one on the screen right now.
Sorry, I keep switching
Oh,
it
this
on
is,
you.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
That was me,
that
that
one.
was me.
So the 2.5, so the maximum, if we stayed at the 15%, 15 density, you're looking at 39 units.
And
That's
that's-
minimum, but we could do something bigger.
Well, again,
That's-
I talked about the compliance model being complicated. The compliance model would probably yield higher than, it would definitely yield higher than 39 units.
But between the 100 that Venacasa proposed and the 39.
Yeah, so it's
So it wouldn't-
somewhere in there. So, and again, Central Mass Regional Planning, just to give you the update you requested of me on that, is rerunning all of these, just to double check all of them as we speak. They are running the unified ones tomorrow because they wanted any input the board had into those two parcels. If you really wanted to look at both those parcels or just one of those parcels or slightly altered parcels. But we'll have those next week. We'll have the results of the compliance models next week. And the compliance models include a yield number. So you'll actually have the actual yield numbers as well. So you'll be able to make a much more solid, informed decision at that point, whether you can get it done with one parcel or two, or you need three, or if you can't do three, you can only do two. So we'll have a little more background on that next week as well.
And that 2.5 isn't, the 2.5 is the cleared pad. Now, obviously, we went over Stephanie went over the constraints around that, but it's just 2.5 that are cleared. So is it 4?
So for this parcel, for 99 Boston Road, I would expect it's only about 2.5 acres. There might be a little bit of buffer there, but because of all of these constraints around the parcel, you don't have an opportunity to expand it a lot more. However, Unified Parkway, which has a 2.8 acre cleared pad, has a significant opportunity to expand that. It's not as constrained at all. But 99 Boston, it's a great site, but you just have to be very aware that you're being surrounded by floodway and water bodies and slopes.
Is it in the floodplain?
No, so if you look here, it's kind of hard to see. This is the parcel here. This stripy area and the blue are floodway and floodplain. The orange is a 500-year floodplain. FYI.
So earlier Norman used the phrase killing,
1,001 on there too.
Nope, green is a Title V buffer.
so earlier Norman used the phrase killing multiple birds with one stone. So I guess as I take a step back and look at these, it's nice to see we've got a few good options here that look good for MBTA and 40B, and potentially have some 40R, which has some other good benefits. And I think the other nice thing is if you went into multiple projects or multiple lots, the timing, you wouldn't want to bring on 180 units all at once. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons for that, but you know, having a nice staging could be a way, you know, again, we're looking at sort of scenarios. One scenario is do nothing, one scenario is up or high, but there's, you know, in our probably most probable scenario, there's adding housing here. So, but it looks like there's some good locations. for it.
Definitely, which begs, I want to extrapolate what he said. So Jen, on a question had earlier this week around.
You live there.
Yeah. Nobody's sitting there, so you put your name down to everyone, but there you go.
Fancy.
There you go. So you mentioned that you're going to reach out to KP Law to confirm that we could designate an
We did.
area as 48. So can you give me an update on that?
Yeah,
And
well,
I think, because I think it may be very welcoming for those in town, and we can probably share that this is still
So I had already discussed with our housing expert at KP Law whether you could have a site that was MBTA and have a 40B developer come onto that site as well. And why would we ask that question? Well, because per earlier discussion, the reality is, Christine was right. These two laws are not meant to do this necessarily. They're meant to do this to some degree because one of the laws is to create affordability to HUD standards, affordable to those making 80% of the median income or less. That's Chapter 40B. The other law, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, is meant to increase the supply of housing, period, and in the form of multifamily housing. Again, anything other than single-family housing, duplex, tri, 4, and up, okay? So they're coming at housing from two different angles. They do help the overall housing situation and affordability at some scales in some different ways, but they are at two different purposes. So because one of them is meant to increase the overall number of housing, which in theory, once you get enough supply-demand, brings costs down, affects market affordability, not just HUD affordability, they have capped, basically said, we don't want you using more than 10% affordability in there, because you use more than 10%, you start to make things uneconomic for developers to build. So why would we ask the question whether you can do both? Well, because 40B is 20 to 25% affordability, and 40A is max 10%. So the question was asked of council because we have on one of these sites a developer who out and out said, I am totally open to you designating my site as MBTA. I can't get 15 units per acre on this site. I don't want to do 15 units per acre on this site. But you can designate me MBTA, and then I'll just do a 40B with less density. I'll do apartments, and apartments gives us the extra bang of 25% is affordable, 70% is market rate, but you get to count them all on your subsidized housing inventory. So we have a developer, we have a site, we have a situation, we ask council the question. If we designated MBTA, he comes in and does a 40B, do we now fall back out of MBTA compliance because we have a project that's 25% affordable instead of 10%? And she
Can I
said
just
no.
ask a quick question? So 40B has a floor of 20% and then up to 25. And these regs allow you to go to EOHLC and get approved for up to 20%, which is a floor of 40B. So doesn't this work when you?
Yeah, if you manage to make that argument effectively, that it's not an easy argument. I just started looking through Grafton's application, and honestly, just looking at our base census figures, I don't know that Sutton will qualify. But I mean, we have that study. We can go through that effort if we want to do that. But again, so back to, can you layer them? And so council had said, yes, you can. I see nothing in either statute that says you cannot. And so you guys asked that question again. I went back to council and I said, look, I need verification because somebody on the group said there's scuttlebutt out there that you can't do that. And she said, no, let me be very, very clear. You absolutely, you can have MBTA, and MBTA has to go first. And then once it's MBTA, period. And then somebody can choose to come in and do 40B, and you do not lose your MBTA designation.
Okay.
And she went into a lot more detail, statutory language, but she reaffirmed that, and I'm confident in the way she worded it, that we are very, very solid.
Good. And did so, thank you for the clarity, because I know I had that question when I was doing some research, so helps. So in the event, we're looking at options for 40R. So we get that walkability, the storage, right? So likewise with the 40B, so as a developer, is that, let's say hypothetically, the lot near Market 32, just for giggles, is that we define that as MBTA. It comes in later on for that mixed use as 40R. Right? We're kind of like in a safe, quasi-safe harbor. That we're killing, essentially, is it right to say we're kind of killing two birds with one stone?
Yeah, I mean, 40R is actually even better.
Yes.
Yeah, 40R is even better because not only is this some gray area where we're taking the advice of counsel, the statute actually says, if you layer 40R, the MBTA statute says, the regulations, the emergency regulations, which are legally in effect right now and anticipated, they certainly wouldn't scrap this section, I don't think, actually encourages you to layer 40R and use 20% in terms of your affordability.
So
Do we need to do 40R first?
No, in fact, if you read the way it says, it actually looks like they're encouraging MBTA first, 40R second, but it doesn't matter.
But isn't there something in there that they have to review your 40R and approve it for the MBTA?
They always have to review your 40R. That's the standard process.
And what's the lead time for that? How long does that take?
Oh, it depends. It depends, again, with anything they review. When you enact 90 days is the max that the Attorney General can take, but the EHLC, you would review it before you even go to town meeting, or ideally before you go to town meeting. And it depends on how many people are in the queue, basically. So I was talking to Central Mass Regional Planning about our compliance model and wanting to submit it to the state through their compliance model check. And they said, they've heard of it going through them and then going through the state in a week, it going through them and going through the state in 2-3 months. So it depends on what's in the queue for their limited staff to review on that side.
What I'm curious about is if our recommendations are to go with a MBTA community, would it be wiser to go with 40R first or to go with 3A?
Doesn't
with
matter.
MBTA? Well, why I'm asking that is because there are certain design standards that can be implemented with 40R. So would it be wiser for, if we were to recommend MBTA, would it be wiser for us to first do 40R so that we can put those design standards in place before MBTA? And that allows the town to have more control over this.
You can also do design standards with MBTA. So you can be a little more detailed with 40R. So it's really your call.
Because with 40R, we can go above the 20% affordable requirement.
Again, it's got a high test, just like going higher in the MBTA, higher than 10%. It's got a high test, and you and I have both done, you in the housing presentation of the planning board, me into subsequent presentations, shown that even though they seem very quiet out there, we do have a significant percentage of individuals already living in the town who would potentially qualify for affordable housing. But it's not a big, fat number. And both of those tests to go higher percentage tie back to your actual existing demographics. So we end up short a lot when we're trying to tie back to existing demographics. We have more than people would think who qualify for affordable housing, but less than a lot of those formulas want us to have. We still need to go through that process, in my opinion, as a planner, to try to get those numbers up. But whatever you think works better as a group, you can go with in that case, because the statute's pretty clear. It doesn't give you an order,
Yeah.
but you can do, and I would never recommend MBTA regs even, without some massing design criteria as well, because of what we spoke about with, certain people saying MBTA forces 10-story buildings. It absolutely does not, unless you let it do
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
So we do
I just-
have,
So Jen, not to interrupt you, this is Andrea. So doesn't this come down, so when we designate our MBTA parcel, we have to go into to have it approved by the state before we bring it to a vote, right?
you don't have to. No, that's, as you know from the information I've already given you, 131 communities out of the 177 have adopted compliant or bylaws they believe are compliant. Those are in review.
But they're not approved.
But
yet.
here's why I
Review.
was
That's-
asking.
You don't have to, so they believe they're.
But if we did, and we drafted that approval in a way that hit, and I'm gonna call it the chapter 40 trifecta.
Yes,
It hit 40A, it allowed 40R,
Yeah.
and it accommodated 40B, and we put it in the approval, and we said, by the way, this lot, it's the chapter 40, pick your alphabet, trifecta, and the state said, go for it, then wouldn't we have in site review the ability to maintain control so that if they went for 40R, we would have a voice there, the town would have a voice in a 40B, and it would get us out of the 40A box.
I mean, there's a very set procedure. When you adopt 40R, you adopt a set of regulations. It spells out the review process. When you adopt 40A, you adopt a set of regulations. It spells
Right.
out that. And 40B is already spelled out under comprehensive permit law through a process with your zoning board of appeals. So what you're doing when you adopt these regulations at town meeting, if a group puts them forward, you're going to use as a base the state model. Presumably, if you pretty much follow the state model and you tweak it to take it down from 10 stories to 3 stories for Sutton, you take it down, then presumably you're coming up with something that is then approvable by EOHLC and the Attorney General in the bylaw review process. They're all separate approval processes, though. You don't really provide one package, but, in every respect that you can craft any of those bylaws so that they work together seamlessly, and you have the ability to pop from one to another, and in each of those you have design controls, then that's what you should be doing, and that's what we would
Yeah,
always.
no, I hear that, and I've been looking at a lot of potential, some towns that I think that I would like to live in. I guess is the only way that I admire for their management: Sudbury, Lincoln, Dover,
Yeah, there's
Brimfield, Weston.
no reason to
one-
reinvent the wheel,
Yeah, no, well, I hate to say this on a publicly taped document, but it's not that plagiarism hasn't occurred across bylaws before in America.
No.
But it should occur. That's,
I'm not being disrespectful, but yeah, I mean, if somebody's got a good idea, let's use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Got it.
are you aware of any other towns that have done that in terms of the designate an area as MBTA for 40A and later on envelope that with 40B and it kind of
Well,
like.
you don't ever designate something 40B, period.
Yeah,
That's
correct, yeah.
Never.
No.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
not
do
talking
it.
about designate
Don't do that
40A and then
to
have a
me, Norman.
40B developer
Yeah.
come in.
I can't point to a specific
Okay, all
use,
right.
no. That's why we went to council and said, it's easy if we can point to somebody who's already
Yeah,
done it.
yeah.
When you don't have an example, even if you did, you would still go to council and ask them.
It'll be like another Sutton first if it follows through.
So another quick question, back to the pre-approval. So they have 90 days if you submit for pre-approval. But what happens if we don't do pre-approval? We go to town meeting, town meeting approves it, the state reviews it, rejects it. Do we have to go to town meeting again because now that accepted bylaw is rejected?
If they reject any element of it, what they can do is two different things. They can allow the bylaw to stand other than the objectionable section and basically tell the planning board they have to address that section. So then you'd go back to town meeting to adjust that section, or they can, yes, reject the whole thing, which is, again, the one benefit to having two bites at an apple for MBTA. So, again, I would not recommend any group, or nor would I, not start with the state's model on any of these regs. So you start with the state's model, and as long as you're not throwing out a primary provision, there's not a lot of chance that you're not going to get an approval. If you read the purpose section carefully, which includes economics and blah, 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 and you change it so it's Suttonified, so to speak, and including a hardy section on design, massing, and the like, and that's what you submit, then there's little reason to think, and I have written many bylaws and based many bylaws on state models over 40 years, there's little reason to think you would not then get Attorney General approval. Attorney General approval, in fact, is really just making sure you're not violating basic premise of law. It's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities that'll be looking at the detail. So, they don't specifically say it's only going to take 90 days. That's the longest period that CMRPC has noticed in the communities they've been working with.
I think the bylaws say they have up until 90.
Oh, good, yeah.
And then the other thing that, just out of interest, because I know we've done recent bylaw changes, can you just, off the top of your head, either you or Mike, so we made changes to our earth removal bylaw. So now, I think any type of project is limited to, is it 500,000 cubic feet removed without needing a special permit?
I don't know exactly what the number is, but if you're dealing with a project that has an approved site plan, which any kind of housing project would be going through a permitting process with the planning board or the zoning board, depending on what kind of project it is. Those projects only need to get what's called an abbreviated Class 2 permit. So they're just coming in for this. It's a one-pager where they're submitting a specialized plan that shows all the cuts, fills, volumes, and does all that kind of
So is that
information.
defined as a special permit?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It is not a special
Because
permit.
it specifically said no special permits for earth
Yeah.
removal.
Yeah, nope, that is really, it's an administrative approval.
So if I may interject here, is that I think we need to kind of get back on task a bit here and get moving, because it's already 25 after 8, so we don't have much time to get through the other groups. And we should make it very clear to those who are listening that we are not proposing that Sutton do the MBTA yet.
Correct.
We are looking at just the
Scenarios.
options
Exactly.
of this. So let's just be very clear about that.
Yep, yeah.
Yep.
Because President.
Jerry, I think that the reiteration of the point for complete clarity is that we are looking at MBTA only to the extent that it affects the housing production plan.
Yes.
Exactly.
And on that
It's
point,
a very narrow mandate of the committee. We're the Housing Production Plan Committee, but unfortunately, we have this overlay on our shoulders, and the overlay on our shoulders was the examination of this MBTA. I don't know if I'd like you to all comment on that, because that's what I feel that we want to make sure that we are properly focused on the narrowness of our mandate.
yeah, thank you, Andrea. Just, Jen, I have one clarifying question, though. We've talked about rentals before, and I had this understanding that all rentals, and I don't know if it's because of the market rate or if it has to be deed restricted, but at one point we talked about rentals would qualify as affordable. So in one of these scenarios where we were to designate one of these MBTA, say by Galaxy Pass, if we did, and then those units were to be rental, what would be required in order for those to be considered affordable?
All right, so to be considered affordable and counted on a town's subsidized housing inventory, which gives you progress towards your 10% requirement under Chapter 40B from 1969. They have to be deed restricted units. So that can be done through a 40B process. That can be done separately and kind of voluntarily through what's called a local initiative project process. All of that requires a regulatory agreement and deed restrictions that I've told you before would recommend would be in perpetuity. So usually you'll have an MBTA area, and you'd encourage the developer to come in on a 40B, and then the state handles all that for you. The regulatory agreement, the lockdown for perpetuity, the minimum percentage affordability, and in that process, I can tell you that if they're apartments, they're all apartments, 25% are affordable, you will be able to count 100%. The question remains, and Wes asked me it today, or caused me to ask myself it today, is if you're doing an MBTA with affordability or a 40R with affordability that are apartments, what is your ability to count apartments outside just the ones that are affordable under those two statutes? To my knowledge, you do not get the same bonus under 40R or 40A for apartments that are not deed restricted as affordable. You only get that bonus under 40B. But I will be looking into that
All right.
this week, so we know that. So then you know what to do.
Yeah, because I mean, to answer your question, Andrea, and to your point is, for me personally, is am I 100% sold on it? No. Do I think it's going to be there? I think there's a lot more clarity, right? Because it's not convoluted. It is a way, whereas it may be in a maneuver, but it has to be communicated as well as very consumable for the town residents, right, at the town meeting, right? So I'm not 100% sold on it. I have a lot of questions, assumptions on it, right? So there's still a lot of unknowns where MBTA is going to go. So, but it's an avenue. It's an avenue to pursue. But what you just mentioned, because I had the same concern, the same question, is the number of apartments that would be yielded to that total count. So if it's 40B, we're going to be looking at different angles on the 40B, which is we're not going to get the 40R attributes that we want to see. But again, we can have that mix kind of like
Yeah, there's
environment.
pros and cons, and
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do for you and for myself and for the town is to help you articulate the spreadsheet in your head. You know, here's the pro of this, here's the con of this, here's the pro, here's the con. So when it comes to a town meeting vote, ideally, anybody who chooses to be informed can be fully informed, and they'll have that full spreadsheet in their head. And then when they're making that gut decision, they're not just making an emotional decision or based on something somebody told them. They've got all the facts in their head, and then they can make a decision.
Jerry?
Yeah, but Jen, won't the MBTA statute will ultimately come from the planning board, right?
The MBTA.
I mean, we're the housing production committee.
The MBTA, any bylaws relative to anything can come from a number of sources, including a multi-member board. Whether that would include a working group or not, I'll find out. So we can see if it can come from you,
frankly,
or if it would go a recommendation from this group back to the planning board, and then would the planning board
Yeah,
proceed? So,
We would be providing a recommendation to yourselves of what to do with the town, right? So our recommendation would be which sites to use for the MBTA, what our drafts or guidelines are for the MBTA wording should be for the actual sorry, Andrew.
Bylaw.
I like the flu. Bylaw. I got the flu, so my brain's not 100% right now.
Thank you for being
And
home.
then the planning board would be taking that to the town. So like we're putting together all the recommendations for what the town should be doing going forward. So I think, Andrea, that's what you're getting towards with that.
Yeah,
right?
that's right,
We're
Wesley.
putting
I
together
mean,
recommendations.
this housing production plan needs to be, and all the members of our committee need to be fully educated on all the aspects of how the law is working and how our demographics of our community are sitting, so that housing production plan can articulate a statement which says, we have considered all of these factors. And the MBTA piece, in terms of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each parcel, is important because it goes directly to the number of units on the housing production plan that we want to see what our aspirations, how our aspirations relate. It is, and I would like to ask our committee, it is not my understanding that we are a stand-in or a substitute for the full discussion of the MBTA designation. We are simply one aspect of the consideration of how that MBTA aspect will affect the future of Sutton.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you are digging in with a lot of detail. Hopefully, people are watching and paying attention. And your recommendations you literally can do, as a group, what you wish to. Your mandate was to produce an update of the housing production plan. As narrow as, how are we going to produce 40B housing? As broad as, what's the general housing situation in the town of Sutton? What are the different things we need to consider? And what's a nice holistic plan going forward, which is what was done in the original plan. So updating the original plan includes this broader look that you're taking at it. And then that goes back to the planning board, your updated plan for approval, and to the Board of Selectmen for approval. Along the way, you may be taking these bite-sized pieces and either as a group or back to the planning board as a group, making some recommendations that they can choose to do with what they will on. So if this group takes the MBTA piece, does all of this work, and hands back to the planning board and or the Board of Selectmen recommendations on considerations for MBTA, here, we think you should maybe consider this for Springtown meeting, here's all the stuff we've done, here's all the pieces, then it's up to whoever you're handing it to, the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, or again, I will just check for the heck of it, if you qualify as a multi-member board to do it yourself, wants to put forward something to the town meeting floor. So.
Yeah, if I could just interject too, I mean, I think from the planning board perspective is the hope of this type of group here is that even if it goes to the planning board to be put on a town meeting, that the 10, 15 people here get up and support it if they do as well. You know what I mean? It's a much more powerful argument if this broad group of people, it's not just two planning board members presenting it. It's, wow, people from all over town are getting up and talking about it and have knowledge about it to present out in a more effective way, as part of the communication, so that the people sitting there go, wow, these 10, 12 people all have bought in, not just 5 or 6 members of the planning board, so.
To the chair, can we move, do we feel that we are safely able to move to the next agenda item?
Yep, and since we combined those, I think, I don't think we need a vote to move on. So I would just say let's roll into the item, the next team's presentation or discussion of the MBTA bylaw.
No, that was all covered,
that was
I
all-
think, with this
we-
one. We grouped
It was
that
all
together.
covered, yeah, because
We're all good with that
what
one?
we discussed really, so Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, the reason why when you think about it, we were talking about every aspect of a bylaw as we went through what's in the MBTA analysis, 40A, 40B, 40R, so, yeah.
All right, good to go. All right, so let's roll into the group one.
Leslie?
It was just background.
We'll do the group one and group three updates. So I suggest we do group one first.
Do you want to speak to that, Don, or you want me to?
I think you know a little more than I. I know we've been going through some of the data.
Can I just ask, who are the members of this subcommittee?
It's myself, Don, Michelle, and Tim.
Who's talking?
A weird echo in
Who
here.
is
We have
that?
some
Echo.
feedback
Not sure.
from Wes, if
Looks
you
like
don't mind
Wes.
muting.
So just real briefly, because we're running late, we have been reviewing, like everybody else, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so we've been looking at what other communities have done for their surveys. And then one of the things that came up, because I understand how important communication is, and like when I listened to Andrea, I was like, so one of the things that I feel is that not everybody is going to be as well versed as she is. So we're actually, one of the things we talked about last week right off the bat is maybe coming up with like a little cheat sheet of speaking points or conversation starter. And then you can get the conversation going. As Wes had mentioned, there's 16 of us, we can all be out there chatting, but I'm not sure that everybody will feel quite as comfortable being out there. So we're going to be looking at that kind of thing, and then reviewing some other community surveys. And then Jen offered, and I was looking for that email. Can you summarize like the essential, like what?
CMRPC?
Yes. I just couldn't find it on my, too much multitasking. Here, you want to sit here?
All right, so Central Mass Regional Planning can help us with this process from 3 different positions. One is with anything specific to MBTA, and really anything having to do with MBTA. So if there's something that you want them to delve into about MBTA, and, getting other towns' bylaws or blah, 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 we can have them do that. The second thing that they are doing, and that includes running the compliance models. That's one of the things that they're covering in their MBTA funding that we applied for and received through them. The second area is with local planning assistance hours. They're doing that demographic update. They're about halfway through that already. So we should have some updated demographics in the very near future. So that's great. And then the third thing that they've offered to do is to apply for district local technical assistance funding to help this group with anything they want help with in terms of communication of the process, of the products, of anything, helping you run public forums, writing or taking your questions and formatting the online survey, tabulating it for you, putting everything out visually in terms of the survey results. They will apply for that funding if you want. They would just need somebody to show up at their meeting on the 30th, either remotely or in person, and say, hey, yeah, if you can give us money and help, we'll take it. So that's completely up to you. If you would like to do all of that yourself, have at it. But I have used them on many, many occasions to even just take my questions, not write the questions, or to write the questions because they work with tons of communities on these surveys, and they can take out things that are not as, you want your questions to be neutral, you don't want them to be slanted if you can help it, and they're very good at picking up those things. So.
Say the meeting was the 30th?
It's actually the 20th.
20th,
Okay,
sorry.
okay, because there's no 30 days in February on the meeting.
Sorry about that. Yeah, there's not 30 days in February, come on. So, yes. So, yeah, you just need to show up at the meeting and tell, and you don't have to know at that moment what you need help with. You just want to say, yes, we'd appreciate the help. These are some of the kind of things we'd like to do with that, maybe. And they will secure that funding. And then you just need to let them know as soon as you can the things you want them to work on, because they need to assign staff and or interns where appropriate to tackle those things for you.
So would the funding cover it all, or would there be a cost to the town?
You know what? I think the funding would really cover it all. I mean, including, and I did ask this specifically, including the printing and mailing
All right.
of the surveys. So, it's a no-brainer to me, but, I mean, I'd be
That's all
all
good.
over it, but.
I have to question whether or not it's worth doing the
Jerry,
survey we've done.
Can you either come in or pull your microphone? Because Zoom can't hear you unless you're talking into a microphone.
Right in. Yep.
So I have to question, is it really worth us doing the survey? We've had 2 surveys out already. We have a limited number of response. If you look at both surveys, they're pretty much the same responses that we get. So what's the likelihood of us getting different information by putting this out there?
Completely up to you. Yeah, I mean, it's 100% up to you. We talked about how the last 2 surveys that went out, we got about 300 responses. So we don't get a ton of responses. It is statistically relevant, so, it is. But, yeah, I mean, it's more inclusion, you're being more, I think you're doing a good job already, from what I hear around town, of people being more aware of the process you're doing here. So, maybe you get more participation. Are there things you don't think you know from those last 2 surveys? But again, 100% up to you, because I am all about, what's the benefit?
The only thing I could think of is that if we do a good job crafting the actual questions and then put this out, it makes sure that members of our community don't come back in a few months' time and say, I didn't have an opportunity this time.
Yeah, I look at that as a
And
safeguard.
that's something good.
That's how and I especially feel, since we have this new working group trying to, I mean, this was the whole thing. Everybody said it wasn't transparent, they didn't know, they didn't. You know,
Yeah.
that's what you guys said over and over and over again. So it's one more shot from this group with these, a new effort.
And we're trying to reach out on social media a lot, and
Could I ask us that we retake this question up when we talk about the scheduling, which I think is the next agenda item?
Can I go back and say, I really liked Pam's idea of having talking points. I really appreciate that. I think that's helpful. And I think that it would be also helpful to loop in with CMRPC and under MBTA have sort of a one-pager FAQ kind of document on MBTA specifically, which I feel like they probably already have or have the documents for, because everyone's kind of grappling with the same question. And then separately, I think creating an FAQ around what are we proposing, and we don't exactly know necessarily what that is yet, but those questions of like, okay, you got a lot of 40s here, like what is it? What do all these things mean? Can you give me a breakdown? And some of those definitions of things that we're maybe throwing around and we're using as an explanation for another answer, that we're not defining each of those pieces that we're using. You know what I mean? Not articulated
The other
well.
point is too, before we go to the next thing, but is that a year makes a difference from last year. Is everybody's been hearing or reading about the MBTA, so you may have a propensity to have a higher yield of respondents, right, and a further opportunity for education. So you could get a high number, maybe up 500, right, but it's better than 300. So anyway,
We can pressure test certain scenarios as well. So let's just recap that one on the when we get to the schedule. But are we good for group one? Should we go to group four?
Group
I'm
three.
sorry, group three.
you want to go? I mean, do you want to go by bullet first, or?
Sure.
All right. So you want So who did the first bullet?
Someone?
Okay. Okay. Great. Just want to go in order.
Okay. So basically, in a quick thing that we had thought of looking at was the difference in tax revenue if it was commercial or if it was housing, and then some of the increases in expenses. So the biggest part of our budget is actually the school, with about 58% of our $38 million budget goes to the school. So one of the things that we had to kind of figure out was, since the MBTA regulations don't give you any occupancy or bedroom maximums or minimums, what we did was we basically went to HUD and we kind of went to 40B for some guidance. So HUD allows 2 people per bedroom plus 1. So in a 3-bedroom unit, you could have 7 people in the apartment, in the 3-bedroom apartment. Worst case, you could have 6 children and a single parent, okay? So we wanted to say, well, what's our worst impact that we could get, or the most impactful? And that would be 180 units times all 3 bedrooms times all having 7 occupants with a single parent. So that gives you the max number of children that you would potentially have. And then we just, that came up to, I think it was 1,086 kids. Okay, so that would be the maximum. Then we went and said, well, these 40B developers, they've been using the National Association of Home Builders recommendations for children per unit based on what they've seen across the country nationally. So when we applied those, what we did was we put the 40B max for 10% have to be 3-bedroom, and then we just put 80% as 2-bedroom and then 10% as 1-bedroom. And we applied those ratios and we came out to 49 children. So in 181 apartments, the max would be 1,086 and the more practical would be 49, okay? So Jen had provided us with like cost per pupil. So when you add 49 children to a school system, you don't just multiply 49 times the cost per pupil. You have to go back and look at the total expenditures. So the Division of Local Services Massachusetts. You can go on and you can just look up any town, and it gives you all kinds of information about them. And so for what they're reporting for the budget for 2024 was 22.5 million in education. So I said, well, if we have 49 students, let's just say our biggest cost driver at the school is going to be teachers, right? So we don't know where the teachers are going to have to be or whether they're going to shift around. So I said, well, if we add $500,000 to the school budget, what is that going to do to the per pupil spending? And it actually doesn't really, it reduces it slightly because now you have more kids and it didn't go up the whole amount. So that was one of the things that we kind of were looking at. And then we didn't have an opportunity to kind of put it all in spreadsheet form. And then the other issue would be, people would be asking is, oh my God, we're going to have to build a new building. So we brought the new high school online, I believe, in 2013. That school building, at that point, the complex from K to 12 was designed for a capacity of 1,800 students, give or take. And so at its max, around 2009, we had 1,684 students. And as of 2025, we have 1,291. So we have capacity at the building. We just might not necessarily have a levy ability to levy the revenue we need to fund the school system. So that's kind of, we put a lot of work into understanding all this, and that's kind of where we ended up. I did reach out also. There's the excise tax that would come for apartments that do not have access to public transportation. You can kind of assume 2 cars. So I compared to the Grafton 40B that's currently under environmental review off of 140. That's a 152-unit complex on 8 acres, and their trips per day are 1,050. So how to quantify a traffic impact on any of these sites? So we've got a lot of data, and we've only been working as a group for a short period of time. So that's kind of where we were numbers-wise, building-wise, impact-wise, and we've reached out to assessing, to HR, to try to get some average costs for different things. So.
Yep. Jen?
Somebody asked me a question, so I just wanted to fly it to you if you could just look it up, because I don't know the answer to this question.
Okay.
But Chapter 90 funding for schools, how much additional Chapter 90 funding do we get per child too? Somebody asked me about that. Certainly doesn't cover the cost of a child, but it does go up to by some degree.
So can I just ask you, I'm not familiar with Chapter 90, is that state or federal? Because if it's federal, we don't know what's going on.
It's
It's
state. It's
Okay,
state.
so having watched Maura Healy's State of the State, she is talking about taking some of that fair share money and making sure that 50% is going to go to roadways and education, and she's looking to put more money into education because of the deplorable scores that we're seeing. I guess they're saying that almost every grade level is about a half a year behind, and that's nationally. So I could reach out to Harrison for that, the business manager at the school.
Yeah, I'm sure he could.
And I'm not too familiar with the cherry sheet, but as far as the levy, if anyone wants to understand the levy, 2.5 overrides, how TIFs are impacting the levy, that I can answer. But as far as the cherry sheet at this point, I need to meet with someone about that.
Great. And the other thing you asked me to do, because you touched on traffic, was, this is the one thing I did not get in the spreadsheet, but you asked me to get you numbers, so I'm happy to provide them to the group as a whole, but I'll get them to your group as they're looking at traffic. Was the list of different housing types. So single-family apartments, there's 3 different levels of apartment: low-rise, high-rise, mid-rise. Condominiums, senior single-family and senior attached, and their trips per day that range anywhere from 3.44 trips per day up to 9.52 trips per day.
And I bet you the 3.44 is going to be like your 80
Senior attached. Yeah. Senior attached. So I did get those numbers as you requested
Can you
me.
email them over?
Yes,
So
I will email them to you, but I'll also put them in a spreadsheet so you have them. Plus, this is 9th edition of the ITE, and we're up to the 11th edition, so I want to double check them all and just make sure.
All right.
That's it.
All right, so for scenarios, so what we did is thinking about how to hit our 40B 10% requirement, we looked at a couple different scenarios. And as you'll remember, we looked at one scenario, which is to get to the 299, which would be the minimum number we would need as one point, all the way up to, as Wes had calculated, 1,700. Between those 2 points, we also said, hey, what if we did a do nothing? So this gets back into the, what if we took some of the various risks on? In a subsequent meeting, we'll go through some of the models and numbers. Let me just give a few high points about those different scenarios. On the upper end, keep in mind that as the number of homes increases, the base number, if you want to think of it as a ratio, the denominator also increases. Right. So by my math, we wound up getting up to adding an additional 2,000 housing units, which would increase, if you want to stick with the same 2.7 people per home, it would probably be more than that, but that would bring our population up to over 15,000 people. Now, I love Grafton. Grafton's a nice town, but if I wanted to live in Grafton, I would have lived in Grafton. That's a little bit of a joke because, again, I think when you actually take a look at what that implies for the upper end of the town, if you look at some of the practical constraints around the numbers of lots available, using Christine's stat of 10 road trips per home, if you think about an additional 20,000 cars on the road trips per day, my own personal view is I don't like that. Like I don't like what that implies for the town. So that's on one end of the spectrum. On the do nothing side of it, we also took a look at some other towns. Stowe, I think Lexington's a good example in their CPA community. What they did is they actually acquired existing homes. So they put together a fund. They went out. They paid for deed restrictions to go on some lower cost homes that were where the market cost of that home was closer to affordable, and they also bought some homes and then rented them out. So I think we ought to consider those kinds of options as well. Maybe there's a CPA thing, maybe there's a way to raise a fund as a town with some investors and do something like that with a nonprofit. So I think there's some scenarios like that we had to look at as how do we take some lower cost homes in Sutton. And I think, Jen, I was trying to play around with the math on this or get some data, but I wonder how many homes are there where the assessed values are around or less than 200,000 per unit. There might be some, right? There might be some options that we have to play with to deal with that.
So the assessors provided me with a spreadsheet of every single parcel, and it's by square footage, and I think it might have assessed value, so we might already have this. So I had already started manipulating it and breaking it out by property class to determine how many houses in the town are under 1,800 square feet versus the larger colonials that you're talking about.
Yeah, you don't need to do all that hard work. We have a geographic information system, and the best way to share data is visually. And the kind of maps you're talking about, to break houses out by ranges of square footage, a map that shows housing in town by or parcels in town by different value, those are very short, very easy activities. You just need to tell me what you want, and those can be done very, very
So
quickly.
off the GIS, you can find out the percentage of homes that are under 1,800 that are in the single family that don't have attached in-laws or?
Well, it depends on how many fields the assessors have within their data. If the fields exist within the assessor's data, which they always have square footage, they always have whether they're single family, multifamily, blah, blah, blah. They always have the valuation, then we can compose maps pretty quickly
So
on
then
that base data.
is that something the planning department knows how to do and not the assessing department?
The planning department knows how to do the maps. The assessors, I get to poke around with the stick if I don't have the data in sorted the way I need it sorted to put into maps.
So-
But those kind of things are like, I can walk into my office and 15 minutes from now bring out a map with color-coded valuation.
So is that because you have a paid program or can anybody do it on the GIS?
Oh, no.
Oh.
No, the GIS I think you're thinking about is the tax maps online.
Oh, okay.
No.
I tried that. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
No.
But
The GIS I'm talking about is ArcMap, ArcGIS. It's a mapping program that I've been, I took classes in school to use the mapping software.
So it's a software that's only dedicated on your computer, that's not?
The assessors had it at one point. I don't know if they use it or have it
the bigger
anymore.
point on this one for the whole group to consider is there's a scenario where we don't build some new houses, where we take existing housing stock and
That's a lot of
make it
housing.
affordable. Get it so it is on the affordable housing, the subsidized
Yeah, the
housing
more
inventory.
realistic avenue and where we came from last year when we came into the process was likely it's going to need a multi-pronged
Yep.
approach. You're not going to find
Correct.
299 units that somebody,
correct.
that you can buy and deed restrict. But you also don't necessarily want to build a 299 unit or build enough single-family homes where only 10% are affordable
Right.
to get to your 299. That would be crazy. So
Or-
you do a combination.
In the next year, 17, that might get us, you know, if you think about the staging of some of these things, so that might be an option, a lever to help us get to what we need to be compliant.
So if I can ask you one question, we're going to go back for a second, because you mentioned that as we add housing, the amount we need in order to comply with 40B increases. Will it increase with MBTA? So right now, they're taking 3,600 units times 5%, 181 units. Do they have a review period? Is it annual, biannual, you know, every 2 years, 5 years? That they come back to our town and say,
Oh, are
wow,
you
Sutton,
still in
you have
adjacent?"
5,000 units now, so 5,000 times 5% is, you know, 250 units, and you only have 181, and you designated an overlay for only 181, you're not in compliance, and now you need to go back to your town. So I didn't see anything in the regs that talks about revaluation by the state for growth in your town and compliance to MBTA.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can certainly look into that. As I think I mentioned, we do not qualify as an adjacent small community based on population, based on number of housing units. We qualify as an adjacent small town based on our density, people per
Square mile.
square acre or square mile or whatever. And we got a lot of room to grow there, so it'll be a very long time and probably even more than 2,000 units before we would actually get it kicked out for that.
But it would just be interesting to know, because that's not specified in the regs. So should that be
Yeah.
something that's included in a comment letter regarding these regs?
Or you just go,
Yeah.
because if it's not in the regs, they can't enforce it. Okay, so.
But they can add it at a later time,
They could
right?
let it, and then they have to give you another period to talk about it
Okay.
and fight it.
So, net in all the modeling, my recommendation is we look at, again, some of this, do some of the
Oh, yeah.
repurposing
Boom,
existing,
boom,
as
boom.
well as some of the, you know, as Norman had mentioned, can we use rentals as a way to increase
We
the,
actually
you know-
started looking at tax title properties for the same potential
Yeah.
purposes.
Yep.
You don't want somebody to lose a home, but if somebody's going to lose a home, should the town be looking at that opportunity to acquire that home and deed restrict it?
Yeah, now, with that angle, right, let's say, for instance, is someone still living there? Would they have first access to live in that property?
With the deed restriction?
I have no idea. I have no idea. So I'm not a tax title expert. I don't know how that works, if they actually get kicked out, or if you can leave them, I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna have that
And
separate
again, if
discussion with
something's
you, but.
deed restricted, anybody has to meet an income requirement. So that person, if you're gonna deed restrict it, they could only stay there if they then meet the income requirement.
Okay.
So I'd say if they meet the income requirement, if they don't,
Yep.
Understood.
I can say I know someone in Peabody that just sold their father's home who passed away. 2 homes on 3 acres of land, and the city of Peabody bought the land, bought the homes for rental housing. Rental housing, and they are evicting one of the families in there. So it's probably safe to say that they're not, it depends on the town.
income qualified, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's,
What's up? Okay, through.
I'm so glad you brought that up, though, because it's another angle. There's just so many ways to approach the problem without people needing to get scared that we're going to go in this 2,000 unit direction, because nobody in their, I'd like to think, nobody in the right mind, including myself, would ever consider that the right angle to
Yep.
go.
Very good.
Yeah.
And just if anyone watched the news recently, Cambridge just
Yes.
took single-family parcels out of their zoning, and it's only, now it's all going to be multifamily. You can't build a
very
single-family house in
concerning.
Cambridge. Yeah,
Very concerning, in my opinion, it's very concerning.
Sorry.
I mean, Cambridge is very different than Sutton.
Oh,
Very,
of course.
Very
Very,
different.
It's just that that's another avenue that,
Yes.
a different community is solving their problem. So there's a different,
Exactly. A
different
different-
answer for every community.
So I would like to note that we're at 9:00.
I love that
Been
you're
a
the
long
timekeeper.
day. So, and we still need to talk about the scheduling.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay, so I'll go my third point on the, all right, so what's good about this the work group, we're looking at all options, and hence productivity planning, so we're looking at all options, so it gives a good opportunity to look at options we never looked at before. So as a member of a select board, one of the things I struggle at when we look at the budget is, where can we have recurring revenue streams? Right, and we're kind of locked in on that, right? There's so many, you have new receipts, you have your tax levy, and how can we be creative? So we looked at this opportunity and says, would this be an opportunity, whereas, just an opportunity, looking at all options is, would Sutton be able to own its own, we'll say, 200 apartment complex, right? And develop that as a revenue stream. So with that said, in that task is, and I wrote this down, and this is in the, you should be receiving this in, will be a public document. It's in the repository that Wesley has created. So with that said is, I've spoken to developers. I also spoken to bankers, because bankers provide loans to the 40B developers. So with that said is, the inquiry was, are there any towns in the Commonwealth or in Worcester County that actually owned their own apartment complex around that size, we'll say, not like the senior housing, totally exclusive, like a 200 unit apartment complex. That could be, like, for instance, for 40B. So one of the research areas was to develop findings of any Massachusetts communities that have invested in their own 40A and or 40B housing, subsequently developing a revenue stream for its district. The findings were as follows. As a recent search, no communities were in possession in or title of any affordable housing communities found thus far. There were several communities that have partnered with developers to meet 40B and other areas that meet the the Executive Office Housing Livable Communities in the Commonwealth, aligning with a 40B developer to best meet the needs of a town's character with the best course of action. In other words, we partner. Those were the success stories. And we have a next task that's coming up, not today, but eventually the next task will be looking at that. What were the success metrics and the outcomes for that? To add, in the event if a municipal, such as Sutton, were to entertain the option to develop its own housing authority for its municipal investment and revenue source, as we discussed it in revenue stream, the following would need to occur. Develop a separate municipal authority for housing, communication with the Executive Housing and Livable Communities for approval, meaning the state, would need to be approved with residents at a town meeting. Parcel of land would need to be purchased or use existing land, designate the parcel as 40B and or 40A, and hire developer with terms for a turnkey housing development project. Particularly not in that order, but those are the tasks, some of the key tasks that would need to be done. So other considerations are the realm, right? I always call it the realm, but the rough order of magnitude. So considering the land, in this case, is owned by the town. The cost for around a 200 unit would be in approximate ranges of $40 to $50 million. Soup to nuts. It's a big nut. So you're looking at a mortgage for $40 million. If you go to the lower scale of $40 million, with 20% down, that would be a cost to the town as well, that would go to the town, becomes a $32 million liability to the town. Even with a conservative market value, we'll say, when the project's done, around $60 million, is that you're roughly around, we'll say, about 50% of liability, meaning that the market value is $60 million, right? But the market value, the liability is $30 million. It's still a good spread. It's still in a very good position to be in, right, if you think about it. However, with that is you'll be looking at an average rental revenue, we'll say like you use $1,700 per month, times 200 units per month, we'll say it's $340,000 times 12 months per year. You're looking at $4,080,000, considering it's 100% occupied, right, in that capacity. So you're looking at a mortgage cost, we'll say at today's rate, 6.5%. The mortgage is around $203,000 per month. Mostly gross profit would be about, we'll say $137,000 a month. Gross profit is $1.6 million. With that is, if you take that profit margin of 50% of property manager, you're looking at around $800,000 of revenue to the town. So you think of that as $800,000. My concern is that, and recommendations is not all units are rented for the first and 2 years. Right, that is a huge liability. Considering the positive revenue flow, which is good, this is a large promissory note in liability to the town, which would not be settled well for many residents. And we definitely understand that, including with the consideration the property becomes a growing asset because it's going to grow for the town with the market value growth. So thinking about early on, you have that $60 million growth. Maybe after 40 years, it becomes a very huge asset. The loan is paid off and becomes a very, very strong positive stream. But however, came to the conclusion, I think it's a huge, you think about it, that loan on the onset is probably just to be as big as our town budget.
Yeah, it
right?
is.
It's monumental. It's not a bad idea, right? It's not in the town's business. At the end of the day, Sutton is incorporated, right? We have a measures by S&P. We unincorporated. We're a business at the end of the day, right? On the 18th, I encourage you to look at the preliminary budget, right? So we have to look at both ends of expenses and liabilities. So the conclusion is not to recommend to consider and/or move forward with a municipally-owned housing project to meet any of the Commonwealth's Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities mandates and/or housing laws for Sutton. So it would be advisable to select a reputable 40B developer to collaborate with to develop a housing project that helps retain the rural character of Sutton and town residents while meeting state housing mandates. So we have ruled that out. I think it's a really great idea. My opinion is it's too much of a large promissory note for the town of Sutton, particularly if it's just as big as our town budget. I'm not saying it's a bad investment. It's a positive investment, right? I struggle as a select board member of looking. Next week I'll be looking at sheets. I'll look like Jim Smith's preliminary budget, what Tim would be putting out. I'm like, and I struggle with that with Jim too. It's like, how can we create more revenue streams? It was kind of like lot, right, in an incorporated town like Sutton. So I conclude my measure, not to. Thank you.
And I just have Brian's notes on the Housing Authority. I know we're running over, but if you don't mind, real
Please
quickly.
do, yes.
So as you mentioned, the Housing Authority, Sutton, there is a Housing Authority in Sutton, but it's not part of our local government. It's a separate entity. And as Jen has pointed out before, they built 40 units down near the Wilkinsonville Fire Station about 1969. And so they have about 3,000 people on the waiting list for those 40 units. The typical unit is about 500 square feet with a 10 by 10 bedroom that fits a full-size bed and an efficiency kitchen living room. And the current rent ranges are from $300 to $750 a month. They have an age restriction. You have to be 60 plus, and they take a certain percentage of disabled people under the age of 60. John didn't recommend having the town buy the properties. He recommended to have it state privately funded. He thinks it would be too much of a tax burden on the town. And he also recommended 3 to 4 smaller complexes instead of one large complex. So if we were going to add any type of this is another thing from the master plan and the housing production plan. So when we did the demographics for the town based on the US Census, they took the 2020 census and they kind of pull it forward to like 2023. They don't go up as far. So our mix between our school age, 5 to 18, and our elderly over 65 are kind of similar. So we have to be mindful of that, of meeting the housing needs of all the different people. And the widow or widower whose Social Security benefits are drastically reduced when one of the partner passes away. These are the people who need these types of housing. A lot of people don't realize when you're a married couple, you each draw on Social Security. And if you have the lower earning spouse, you can get 50% of the higher earning spouse's benefit as your benefit. When the higher earning spouse passes, you lose your benefit and you can go up to their step, but you've lost your benefit. So it could be 50% of your income. So that's why there's a need for this type of people on fixed incomes for 20 to 25 years who've drawn down their savings, whose pensions are based on a salary they were making 30 years below. So in the community of Sutton, where we've had an increase in our population, we really haven't increased the availability of this type of housing to keep our older residents who are single, in a place. And we know several people who have gotten apartments there who were municipal employees and who are in the mid 80s, and it's been a great place for them. So that was just Brian's reach out to the Housing Authority. And they're willing to come and chat with us. So sorry to run over.
Thank you for bringing that up when it's not here.
I have a clarifying question. I was trying to reconcile between what you both presented. So I feel like the first part was there's an opportunity for the town to potentially buy existing parcels and transition them and then we would own those, and then you said, let's not do that on
Norma's
a
looking
large
at
scale.
developing.
I'm looking at the big elephant. I'm looking at
Okay,
big
just,
elephants.
so you're
Yeah.
just talking about large scale,
Now I'm
not
looking at
small
200
scale.
plus, so think of like, in
Thank you.
scenario, we want to do something like a
Just
32, we
checking,
own it?
just
Yeah,
checking.
so.
Norma's looking like as if we owned the 20 acres, me, Christine Watkins, and I said, hey, you, I want you to come and build me a 20,000
I
square
just
foot
missed
house.
that it was you were only looking at large. I thought it was all scale. Thank
Very
you.
good. Yep, no, good question, thank you.
Even small ones, you wouldn't take permanent title to. So if you took a home through tax title, made it deed restricted under the local initiative process, you would then sell it with the deed restriction. So again,
I see.
we would
Okay,
not
thank you.
recommend that the town even own those
We
little
could start a
ones.
nonprofit, or, I mean, there's some of
Yes,
those scenarios
exactly.
that.
MHP, which is the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, the one, they do the conference every year. They actually recommend that usually the town purchase land, create an RFI, and then sell that off and have someone else manage it.
RFI.
Yeah, that's what they're doing in
Request
Graft, request for information, or RFP, a request for proposal. That's what
That's the one
Grafton's
I know.
doing on
RFP.
the
Or RFI.
highway parcel right now.
Sounds like a.
The town owns it, they've put out a request for
GSI project.
proposal.
Yeah.
I meant RFP, it just.
Oh, no, that's good.
RFIs have.
I could get an example of one from a project.
Wes,
Yeah,
I mean,
so I
it's
could
a
get an
good-
example
no, I mean,
of an RFI from a project.
Yeah, it's great information because it becomes another, subsection of the housing production report that we have to do, because it again shows the number of alternatives that we're looking at, right?
Yeah, and there's no reason not to do. more
Right?
than
I mean,
one.
yeah.
Yep. All right, good. Jerry, you have a-
Go ahead.
Was there another piece on number 3, or are we jumping into the?
We're
all right.
good.
All right.
Our schedule.
Wes, would you like to talk about the schedule? Just updating the schedule? Since I know you
Well,
have the
the,
awesome project plan.
Sorry. So myself and Pam went through dates that were available for meeting rooms at the town hall, and we have February 19th, which is next Wednesday, is available. And then after that, it'll be March 5th is available. Then March 20th, I can email these out, but I just wanted to plant the seed of the next couple meetings, especially that we have, there'll be one available for next week. So February 19th, March 5th, March 20th, and I can email out the team the entire list. That'd be easier. They're also uploaded in the Smart Sheet for anybody who has access. They're in the schedule section. That way we can stay coordinated on the times of meetings. But we should probably, Pam will give us notice of which room we're going to be in. There's going to be a few times where we're going to be in the smaller meeting room inside here.
So Wes, behind the meeting schedule, can we talk for a few minutes about the overall target schedule for completing the housing production plan report itself?
Sure.
Okay. Can all of you hear me okay? So one of the questions that has come up is how exactly we present all of our work product and how we lead this forward when there are so many issues that are on the table. And I think the issues that are on the table are the uncertainty surrounding what the regulations are on the enforcement of MBTA, the uncertainty on how the actual statute is going to be interpreted, since there's another lawsuit out there now for what really is defined as an emergency. And the third issue, I think that it's the most important issue for all of us that live in Sutton, is that we're in the midst of changing our town administrator. And after I, considered the very ambitious schedule that we had discussed at our first two meetings on trying to get something before Springtown meeting, and spoke with a number of folks in the town and, a member of the select board and several of you separately, it seems to me that what we want to do is to work hand in glove with the individual that is designated as our new town administrator. In both the recommendations that comprise the housing production plan and any thought process and analysis with relation to how we resolve the MBTA issue. And my suggestion to all of us is, would we be willing to consider that instead of proceeding to spring meeting and using every second on the shot clock, that we instead work toward completing the housing production plan and then maybe holding a special meeting to just review the housing production and the bylaws that we're going to have to do to incorporate whatever the state of the MBTA is sometime around Labor Day. And that will allow us to very closely partner with the new town administrator, with any of the staffing changes that he may have in any department throughout the town, and most importantly, hopefully give us some clarity on what the regulations are with respect to the overarching statute that we have to deal with.
And that would still allow a fall town meeting if it didn't work in the special town meeting, correct?
Say it again, Christine.
And that would give us enough time that we'd still have a second meeting with the October town meeting, or would we not because of the date that the bylaws are due on the warrant? So would you have to have this special town meeting prior to the time that you have to have your articles for the fall town meeting, which is usually August, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you need to,
So,
warrants have to be posted a minimum of 90 days before, before town meetings. So yes, I mean, if you had a special town meeting on Labor Day, you're already too late for a fall town meeting warrant.
Unless we posted them twice. So the go around for that, I think, the go around in a proper fashion would be to submit for town meeting the warrants that we are going to vote on at the special meeting. And then if we don't get them through at the special meeting, we have a different bite at the apple at the town meeting. Because remember, they can be amended from the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend any amendments on a floor, but, yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want.
the timing of it, though, let's say this law is still going through, but it's going to be decided in the next, month or so? There's 2 months. We're going to be working on this housing production plan, hopefully get it finished by June, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be dragging out, keep on working on this over the summer to Labor Day,
Yeah.
and then making bylaw changes, or even writing a bylaw then. So we're gonna be picking out these sites regardless, as we're doing right now, and then we could be drafting this bylaw, and if there's any changes to the law, which by the time we're drafting the bylaw, the laws could be decided by then. We could be not fast tracking the draft of the bylaw right now, but we could still be fast tracking the locations. That's not going to change, because even picking these locations.
I mean, just remember, Wesley, our work is only to recommend locations and to then do kind of an omnibus bylaw that we would submit to the planning department, the planning committee, right? Right, because all of our work is going to have to go through planning, and ultimately everything that's presented at the special meeting or the town meeting in the fall is going to emanate with the planning department. So I like the idea of proceeding down parallel tracks where we tie up the HPP by June, and then that gives us, and we're thinking about the bylaw, right? Because the HPP is going to inform the bylaw. Then we get the bylaw in a position where we can submit the bylaw draft with the HPP to the planning board to have it begin its process of making a recommendation for the town. And that would roll up all the things that you and our committee have led us through all of these factors so that we have in one place, you know, the analysis that the town can look at and the planning board can consider.
And like Andrea, you pointed out as well, is that if we put this out on a special town meeting, it's not going to be muddied up with 15 other articles.
Right.
We can have it
I mean,
out at Article 1. Here's what the planning board is saying. We're going to do vote for the MBTA because it's law. And I like that idea that person has said, is that we should evaluate the cost of doing nothing so that the town knows.
Absolutely. But actually, it's interesting, right? Because that's Mr. Marin's idea that we have to evaluate the cost of the benefits and detriments of doing nothing actually needs it to be into the housing production plan report. Because you can't, like, you know, put it under a rug.
Yeah.
Has it been documented?
So, and if we did this where we recommended that a special town meeting is in advance of that fall meeting, because if it fails, then the fall meeting is a backup, so it needs to be on the warrant in time for the fall meeting.
And is there any
Right. So that's
limitation
why
to calling a special town meeting, Jen? It's just, is it a number?
You cannot. The Board of Selectmen has to call it.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
it-
is there a limit?
It's in the charter.
Yep,
And there's a procedure for it.
okay.
I don't have it in memory, but there is a procedure. I
Our
think it
special
requires.
takes 200 signatures or
Yeah,
the
it
Board
takes-
of
yeah, correct. It
Selectmen.
takes signatures, it goes to the
Or the Board
and-
of Selectmen, 200 or, not 200 and. Or. Okay, so the Board of Selectmen is allowed to call a special town meeting.
Yeah.
Are they limited to how many they can call a year?
I have no idea.
For my recollection of reading the charter, I don't think there's no limitation.
Okay, so we have coverage. We have
Yeah,
coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, my instinct here, I like the idea of having it as a separate issue, and I understand that to be, you know, desirable. But I hesitate on 2 points. One is dragging out our timeline instead of giving ourselves a shorter timeline, and then if needed, taking more time. And the second is, I would disagree on the idea that we need to wait for a town administrator. I think the town administrator is here to represent the town, the boards, and the decisions that are already made. They're not coming in to change everything. They're coming in to continue the work that's occurring and to manage the town like a business, right?
Yep.
So I think that they would just be responsible for their portion of implementing the existing plans, including open space and master plan, et cetera, and HPP would just be one of those.
They'd just mainly be supporting the Board of Selectmen in their role.
Right.
And, yes, exactly.
It'd be
No, that's-
baptized, it'd be baptism by fire, but I mean, it's.
Well, no.
That's, I mean, a town administrator coming in is gonna have to
Yeah,
learn
exactly what I'm saying.
everything
It's just
about
gonna be, they're gonna learn,
the
he's gonna
town
learn, he or
anyway,
she's gonna
so.
learn a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff in time.
But
What worries me about that is the enormity of the change that we are going to hand this town administrator and say, thank you very much, run with this.
But
The
he's
select
not,
board,
he's not the one that's running with this at all.
No, it's just a separate,
Yeah,
it's, the town, whatever's developed, the town manager will have to abide by with the plan committee.
Yeah, but he doesn't even deal with any of this.
No.
Yeah.
A lot of these recommendations are on the planning board or on
It's
ZBA
not-
or the town
yeah,
planner, et cetera. They're,
New administrator or new town manager, he or she, it's not in the complete 100% purview.
No, and he's not going to be the one selling any of this to anybody.
Right.
You are going
Right.
to be, the planning board is going to be, the
Right.
staff is going to be. That's who's going to be
I mean, I think, and
promoting
now
it.
you brought that up, if you look at a broader approach, I mean, even to this day, today, Jim Smith and his successor, the charter remains the same in that purview.
Right.
So it's not like that new town manager says, hey, stop what you're doing. You know,
Right.
so it's business as usual.
and it's very unlikely that you would hire a planner as a town administrator.
Actually, no, not
Right.
these days. Not
Maybe.
these days.
Maybe they have great ideas, but
Yeah.
I would suggest that we
Not that, I'm not running, just so we're
not
clear.
change anything.
No, I
and
understand,
go
you know,
home
I
and
understand
think
Andrew's
about
point,
it.
but at the same time, I understand the point that they're bringing out. Because it wasn't, we have extra runway, right, for a more, you know,
I think we have runway now, though, because we have a plan for spring meeting and if needed, fall.
But we have to get something on the warrant, and we can't get the EOHLC or whomever to review our plan, which pre-approval is very important and is recommended, and a lot of the towns are doing that.
Yeah, but
So-
that's why the EOHLC, EOCD.
We should just call it, let's call it the EO because it's too long.
That's why the state,
Executive office.
Yeah.
that's why the state, the housing department at the state set this up with the 13 regional planning agencies across the state before this law was even enacted in 2021. Everybody's thinking, this was enacted last year. No, this law was enacted in 2021, and they worked with 13 regional planning agencies to make sure they had the staff and the capacity to run these compliance models, because they knew there was no way, as this one is enacted, that they had the capacity to run them like this.
So the pre-approval is simply the compliance model.
It's just the it's the compliance model, and then they run down the language. But again, anybody
Then they look
who's-
at all the language in the
You're-
bylaw.
Everybody who isn't totally numb is starting with their model, the state's model. So unless you go completely kablooey, they're really just laying them out side by side and going, boom, boom. And there's certain sections, probably 6 or 7 sections, where you'll find rogue towns will try to go in a whole different direction and think the state are not going to notice that. And they already know what those sections are. So they're going to check those ones first, and then they're going to go back, run through the wording, and boom.
So the problem
Yeah,
is,
I mean,
but
I'll be
Andrea,
honest
one
with you.
second. The problem goes back to what we just experienced at Fall Town Meeting. So at Spring Town Meeting, we have all our budget, all our financial items. We have a
Crowded.
large warrant.
Yeah.
And now you're going to put a really large issue at the end of that warrant. So I can see, like, when the school was on there, we had over 500 attendees.
wrong.
When the marijuana in Whittier's was there, we had over 600. We had almost 700 people with the library.
Oh, yeah.
So to tack this big issue on the back of a big meeting,
Not easy. Not easy.
I don't, this is a big issue. This is a big thing that has to have
We can't
buy-in.
have another.
What
twice in a
happened at the
row.
fall?
Well,
Norman, that's what I'm worried about. If we
no.
have a special town meeting and we give ourselves several more months, this bylaw is not even close to being drafted.
No, I mean, and again, I'm looking at a 360-degree view, right? So in town manager, it doesn't matter who's there, but again, it's like, I hate to see fall on our face twice in a row.
Exactly.
So
I bring it about.
if I may
And
suggest that
if we do this later on in the year, we can condition the town and we can hold conferences and do the educational work. We won't need we can do a survey. We can really make sure that we are in sync with the planning board, the select board, and if he or she is on board, the new town administrator. So everyone can speak to what the work product is.
At the end of the day, the planning board is going to be the sponsor of this, and our responsibility is to do the HPP. And then once we give them recommendations, they have to pretty much, they're going to tweak the bylaw and they're going to sponsor it. It's not ours, it's theirs. So I guess at the end, Mike's on the board.
There's
It's-
a reason why they have a rep on this committee. I've worked for the planning board in the town of Sutton for 26 years, and several of the members have been there the whole time. It is very unlikely, especially because they're making me sit here as your staff support and be part of this process, that they're going to take a bylaw that was crafted with me sitting with you, with all of you working your butt off on it, with a planning board member and all these other members, and go, nah, and Mickey with it. It's just not, I'll give you 98.6% that it's staying the way it is.
Then I would recommend that Mike go on the subcommittee that's writing the bylaw.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we also have oh gosh, you guys, we have to I don't know about you, my brain is off.
So I was going to suggest that we take this next week. We
Yes,
think about
thank you.
all this.
We meet again soon.
And if
Yeah,
we're going to
look at your
meet next Wednesday,
calendars.
we can re-adjourn and carry this conversation on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds good. And yeah,
I tried to say something helpful and it just didn't happen.
So I like to motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Edmar, aye.
Norman Shopping, aye.
Mike Gagan, aye.
Jerry Townsend, aye.
Pam Nichols, aye.
Peter
Zona, aye. Don McKinnon, aye.
So I just want to confirm, so there is a meeting next.
Dan, we still have to
I'm
do.
sorry, Dan.
Dan,
That's right, I was thinking anyway. Dan Spangler, aye. I'll let it go.
70 PM, aye.
Christine Wilkins, aye.
So there is a meeting.
Wesley Stanhope, aye.
Next week?
Matei, aye.
The 19th?
I actually can't be here next week.
Wednesday.
We're very balanced.
The 19th is the meeting?
I'll go to Dunkin' Donuts, get a cup of Joe, get enough cups, right? So we'd be here.
So the
till
meeting
midnight.
is adjourned?
Yeah, he's adjourned.
It's February the 19th.
I'm not here next
Nine-
Wednesday.
19th at
Wednesday.
7 p.m.
7?
So,
Okay.
My vote would be keep it as it is,
I will.
which I said.
I'm really concerned,
you all
I have a
can
360
support
review, but I don't want to see. No, I mean, it wasn't pretty, right? No. And this, now the town's saying, you go back, well, we can't just.
You're breaking open meeting law, sir. Thank you, Christine. Did not speak up loud enough.
Am I supposed to send like an email saying?
Subdivision.
So, Mr. Chairman, we did receive a letter requesting a postponement to our next meeting. I will read it. Dear Planning Board members, on behalf of the applicants, Allen Engineering and Associates, Inc., hereby request an extension of the public hearings for the above referenced permits to be held on Monday night, February 10th. AEA is working with the applicants to address the recent report from Graves Engineering. Please place these items on your next available agenda. Sincerely, Allen Engineering and Associates, Mark E. Allen.
All right, so we have a motion to make to continue this hearing until,
I'll make a motion to continue this hearing until the next. Jen, are you there by chance?
it's 2:24, it's on,
Is it on 2:20? Okay.
2:24 at 7.
Okay. I'll make a motion to continue this hearing to February 24th at 7 PM.
Second.
I would, just a note, I would say hearings, because it's the subdivision hearing and the scenic road public shade tray hearing, so both hearings.
Okay. I'll
Thank you.
adjust that to hearings.
Any other comments? All in favor, roll call.
Aye. Bill Talcott, aye.
Scott Paul, aye.
Wally Baker, aye.
Mike Egan, aye.
Erica McCollum, aye.
A&R Plan, Division of Land on Existing Roadways, 24 Manchog Road.
Mr. Chairman, this plan needs some revisions, so if you just want to table this to the next meeting.
So tabled. Endorse Unified Parkway Modification Subdivision Plan and Covenant approved, which was approved on December 16th, 2024. So we need a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to endorse the Unified Parkway Modifications Subdivision Plan that was approved on December 16th, 2024. It's the big one. Who signs it? Everyone?
Everybody.
Okay. You need
I'll
a
second that motion.
Can you please include the covenant in that motion as well?
There's more to read there, Bob.
There is?
It's,
I can read if you want, Bob.
have it
if you
down
want.
here,
Sure. Motion to endorse the covenant amendment with a performance extension of 12/31/25 and a modified subdivision plans dated 11/15/21, revised 11/19/24.
that's the motion.
That's
All
the
right.
motion.
Was that seconded?
Second. Yep, Bob seconded.
Okay. Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Bob Rogers, aye. Bill Talcott, aye.
Scott Paul, aye.
Wally Baker, aye.
Mike Gagan, aye.
Erica McCollum, aye.
So this is the TAC for signing. Okay. So we have a housing production group that was appointed by this board. Total of 15 people, I believe, is that right? 15?
Yes.
And someone came along and reached out and wants to be on that. So that's our discussion, if that's something we would consider or not at this
I
time.
will just let the record show his email putting in that he was interested did come in a proper time frame. But Jen, is it correct? It went to the wrong email possibly? Is that what I was reading on it?
Yeah, he sent it to the wrong email address and then I guess didn't follow up on that.
He did send
until
it on December 17th of
He did.
2024 when we were receiving all the others. So he
So-
did meet the time frame. Personally, I think the discussion is just, the size of the group, It's 15 already,
It's
which
big-
is
it's big
pretty
enough
large
already.
group.
Right.
Um,
So
Haven't you
what-
guys had several meetings?
Yes. Yes, we've had a couple meetings and a couple subcommittee meetings as well.
Is everyone on board? Everyone staying?
Well, that's to be maybe decided at the, there's a few, we have not had a full 15 yet.
Because we have to have
There's
an
been
odd...
2 or 3 people.
We have to have an odd number.
Well, 15 is.
Yeah, so...
If one more is 16.
16.
I mean, the only
We
other
can't
one
have
maybe
16,
of,
we have to have 2 people, or
Right.
someone has to
of
drop off.
keeping him maybe auxiliary, I don't know. That would work. I don't think we even
Alternate?
need that, yeah.
Well,
Alternate.
from what I understand, we have 2 from the senior center. They only get 1 vote.
Only 1 vote, though.
Yeah. So does that make it an even vote then? If there's 15 people minus 1, that's 14 votes.
I don't think you're ever going to get everybody there.
We haven't yet. I mean, it's been
And-
12 to 15, 11 to...
And seeing he did it, I mean, we took everybody, and
Well, that's the one
what's the
thing.
difference between 15 and 16?
It's 15 votes with just the 1 Council on Aging vote counting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's already counting it. then,
So he
correct.
would make 16 votes.
Right.
So we need 2 people.
Unless we add
Even
the
number.
second person from the Council of Aging onto the committee.
Yeah.
So
I believe their idea was, though, one of them would attend the meeting, 'cause it may not be both of them. Neither one said they could attend all the meetings, so they kind of, because we wanted someone from the Council of Aging, we allowed them to kind of, 2 people to serve as one.
Do that.
So I,
What, so the chairman of the committee, I imagine, would have an opinion on this.
right. Jen, has he heard about this at all, do you know?
He's just had he just knows it's on the agenda. He hasn't really he's not going to express an opinion of the group because the group hasn't discussed it. But he did mention, it's already a big group and we've already met a few times and there's already subcommittees out and though we haven't had full membership at every meeting, he does have a little concern that about having an even member board, which is not the general protocol.
Right. I mean, I guess I'll just throw my opinion out first. I think, this gentleman did make an honest effort. He had been on the select board for, I don't know him personally, but but on the other hand, the fact that it didn't reach our office during the timeline where we did appoint everyone, and it was, now that we do have this board already moving for a month with 15 members, to add 16 does cause some voting potential problems, I think, maybe. Don't add him.
I kind of agree with that myself.
Which I feel bad, though, because anyone, again, we kind of at the beginning was, if you wanted to get into it, we wanted to allow you in, so.
Can he be, just a suggestion, can he be an alternate and have, like we have an alternate, she does everything, and if someone's not there, she
Yeah.
makes us whole. It's not second string, it's just the nature of the business if someone's not there.
Someone will drop off and he would
We
become
need
that.
to have the alternate, so if something happens to somebody,
Or someone's not there.
yeah.
Because all opinions of it, he might have good opinions and offer some insight that,
It's my understanding you have the major meeting, and then you've got all these little subgroups
yes.
that are also doing things. So you've already had subgroups with 2 or 3 sessions.
Right, but a few of the subgroups haven't met yet.
Oh, okay.
I mean, only one particular one that I'm on is
Hasn't
kind
met.
of the urgent with the MBTA piece of it, so.
Do we have a general consensus here of the board? We know we have yours. What's your thought?
I find a way to find him on it, knowing that we have to have an odd number. I suggested we make him an alternate with full,
Bill?
responsibilities.
I say since he reached out and we allowed everybody else, I would think we'd want him on the board. For someone who made an effort to get on, I'd say, and whether it be odd or even, I mean, everybody's not gonna be there anyway. Probably. So I'm for letting him on the board,
Okay.
On the committee.
As a member, not
As
as
a
an
member.
alternate.
as a member.
I think I'd like to have him on the board as an alternate, because one of these days when there's a big vote, it'll be a tie, because everybody will show up.
Yeah, I would kind of go along with that. I think
And I
at this
think I
point,
agree
the
with that.
alternate would
Yeah,
be,
so do I.
Okay.
would be the
So
best
can we
thing.
let the record show, Jen, that we discussed this and came to a consensus that we think he'd be best placed as an alternate on the committee?
All right, I'll let that chairman know how that might work. I've never heard of an alternate on a working group, but I'm sure we can figure it out.
Is it first time?
And,
First time for everything.
yeah. And so he would be like Erica. He could be part of the discussion if he's there and would only vote if somebody else is not there.
That sounds good.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. Next item, Forest Edge update. What do we have on Forest Edge?
Nothing new, it says.
Nothing new, really? Okay. Additional action items. We have the minutes from, do you want me to read this thing about Verizon? Oh, all right. We're having trouble with Verizon. If you can't see us, it's because of Verizon.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for the January 27th meeting. I read them. They look perfect.
Second.
Any other comments? A roll call vote.
Bob Rogers, aye.
Let's Alcott abstain.
Scott Paul, aye.
Wally Baker, aye.
Mike Kagan, aye.
Erica McCollum, aye.
All right, done. Filings for 2/24/25, none. Site visit reports, none. Abutting town notices of interest, don't see any. We have a correspondence. We have a correspondence from Ronald Roy concerning the MBTA housing actions and laws and things that are taking place in the Commonwealth. And so I'm gonna read.
Is that him?
It is. How you doing?
Okay. Good.
We do have a subcommittee working on this similar topic.
Yeah.
Affordable housing and other things to address 40B and other initiatives that are gonna come down the pike.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass along some of the concerns that I've, been reading about and doing a lot more research about it, and sending off my concerns off to Representative McKenna and also to Ryan Fatman. There's a lot of bills, I'm not sure if you're aware, that's want to just make you aware of some of the bills that have been filed during the 194th session of this general court, where they've, I think about 11 representatives and state senators have filed about 23 bills this year relating to either, at a minimum, doing, including some exclusions and then outright repealing of it too. So it goes from the left end to the right end to getting rid of it. So a number of those bills have been filed, and a lot of co-sponsors. Just recently, Joseph McKenna just co-sponsored the five of them as well. So originally he didn't have any of himself, but he co-sponsored it, and so I reached out to him to talk to him about it. And so there's a lot of momentum gearing toward this to help us, get past this at some point, because just realizing from, I'm over on the east side of town, and we're still 7 miles from the nearest MBTA station.
Right.
And our infrastructure is, a lot of pressure on water is going to be included too. So it does, just really, some of it doesn't make sense that they're, what they're trying to accomplish with this. And you have the existing laws out there, the 40B, the 40Ts, and the 121 that you have out there that are, if it's affordable housing, you hear a lot of different mixed messages about what this is all about. But nothing in there that says anything about affordable housing. It's really not geared toward that. So I just want to express some of my concerns that I'm seeing out there, and following it and keeping up with the things that are being filed in the state legislature.
Okay.
And if you have any questions about, anything that corresponds that I had sent to you too, so if you have any questions. But I plan on, and I've been keeping the select board updated as well, sending them some information too as far as things are going on and some of the efforts. I'm in close contact with somebody that's out in Millbury too about their efforts and what they're doing, and some of the concerns that they have as well. It's
Okay.
similar as what we have.
Well, thanks for bringing this to the board, and we will maintain this is an ongoing thing, and we will find out what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure we're not making any, rash, complying to whatever. And even these laws, these emergency laws that they, regulations or guidance that they provided, when the Milton decision came down, it said that those guidelines didn't go through the APA process, which really needs to happen so that everyone has input and voice as to what's going on, with these regulations. And to pass that as an emergency, the SJC didn't say pass emergency ones until you go through the APA process. They threw out the whole guidelines, the Supreme Court did. And then they have to go through it all over again and start going through and having those meetings. And that's why they have right now until the 21st, you can submit any kind of concerns that you have. Anyone can commit as a board, and you can submit those concerns through the online form that they have on mass.gov at the MBTA section. So you have until the 21st to submit. I put in like 6 of them already, and a number of other people are doing it as well. So recommend that if you want to send a message to, I know there's another draft email that you have coming up too that's expressing some concerns too. But there's a lot of input that's going through and a lot of feedback. But these guidelines right now, they're really thrown out. And for them to send out emergency ones, and what's the real emergency? It's there really isn't an emergency. And there's also a lawsuit filed with I think Suffolk Superior Court. Somebody in I don't know if it's maybe Roxbury. There's a couple lawsuits too about these.
Yeah, a few towns have filed lawsuits
And
against them.
hey, you can't
Right.
submit it. There's really no emergency to do that.
Yeah, well, it certainly isn't, yeah, all right.
So I just want to bring that forward to the board and let you know about it.
Good, thank you, appreciate it. Okay. Next order of discussion. So we're being asked to either sponsor, or do they need to go to town floor by petition for what's been brought to us for the Sutton Village Overlay District. And so Valancourt, Folkart, and Brian Stevenson have separately pointed out that neither theaters nor function spaces are allowed in the village districts. They would like to see that happen. There are activities that take place in the Blackstone Hall, which is in Mill Number 1, performances and gatherings and stuff. And then Brian owns the former Baptist Church in Manchac and would like to have opportunities by which he could generate some revenue to maintain the building. So they'd like to see that added to the bylaw as an allowed use in the village districts. So if we think that's a good idea, we can either sponsor the bill, or do we think they should go forward with a petition from the floor?
I would almost say, after our last couple town meetings, that as well as a good idea as could be, I almost think it'd be better if they presented it, and then obviously we will opine on it, make a recommendation. But at the very least, and therefore the proponent will do